when Jim got let go in Boston, it certainly was someone I've respected, someone I admired, someone I felt had all the attributes to be a long-term coach for the Blues, and it started down that process. So this was more of an opportunity to get someone of Jim's caliber than anything else. This decision was based, I would say, almost 100% on having someone of Jim's caliber become available when, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That is what it sounded like yesterday as Doug Armstrong met with the media after the Blues have officially hired Jim Montgomery to be their next head coach. They let go Drew Bannister, hired Jim Montgomery to a 5-year contract. Alex, this was all announced yesterday as we all woke up on a Sunday getting ready to watch the Sunday slate in the NFL. Blues did not play particularly well on Saturday. Pavel Buchnevich had some interesting comments after the game. We will get into those coming up here in just about 10 minutes or so. I'm going to open up with you because you're a Blues guy. Were you surprised at all when you saw this announcement on Sunday that the Blues had brought back Jim Montgomery?
I was surprised because it happened so quick. I thought this was going to be one of those things that you're going to be connecting the dots to Jim Montgomery and the Blues, but it wasn't going to happen until if they went into a longer losing skid than just one game. And that's why it was like I wrapped up post-game Saturday night really not having any feeling like it was going to take place with Jim Montgomery, because although the Blues had 0 offense in that game, again, they were in it. And so it's like, all right, so we'll probably just continue as is. So, yeah, it was a little surprised that it happened so fast. I had a feeling that Jim Montgomery was going to be the coach at some point for the Blues this season. I just thought the Blues were going to wait for the right time, and albeit it was 1 loss, but you're past the quarter mark of the season, so I would imagine Doug Armstrong said now's the right time.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all. It felt like the right timing. It felt like the right guy. How many times did we talk about this last week, Alex, of like, hey, there's not a lot of people that could have become available that would have inspired this kind of change by the Blues. Maybe 4 other coaches in the league, and that might be stretching it pretty thin. Jim Montgomery played here. He coached here. He has a prior relationship with Doug Armstrong. He is the winningest head coach in the NHL over the past 2+ seasons. He has coached young players in college. He has coached veteran players to the point where they won the President's Trophy in Boston 2 years ago with him at the helm. He's coached for cup contenders. He's been a guy that's done everything in between. There is no coach, really, maybe in all of hockey other than John Cooper probably, that has the kind of resume that the Blues would be looking for at this time in their retool, more so than Jim Montgomery. He's the perfect coach at the perfect time for this team. And Cooper doesn't come with the same relationships previously that Jim Montgomery does. So all of it made sense to me. And it just became a matter of, are the Blues really going to do it right now? Because this got into T-Bone's questions last week of, are they really at the place where you want to hire the guy when you're going through the retool? And I thought it was great that Doug Armstrong explained this yesterday on why now is the right time for Jim Montgomery to be the next head coach of the Blues.
Someone that we have experience with, someone, Lou, that I really do believe, can coach this team and also coach the team when it reaches its ultimate level of competitiveness. He's done that. He's worked with younger players in the USHL and in college. Good success in Dallas, good success in Boston. So he's one of those coaches that I really do believe can be with this team now and as it grows. And I think the proof of that is the 5-year commitment, and what one of the things I think is the next part for Jim's career is to get that longevity in one spot. And I look at someone like John Cooper now. He's the standard bearer of what everyone wants to be, a competitive coach year in, year out, deals with different players, deals with players coming and going and finds a way to stay competitive. And that's Jim's next goal, is to stay in St. Louis. And I hope it's for well over a decade. And
I don't think you're going to see any coaches in the NHL, for the most part, a decade plus in any spot. He mentioned, Doug Armstrong did yesterday, Ken Hitchcock, a number of different times. And we mentioned this last week, Alex. This feels very similar to when they brought in Ken Hitchcock, where it's like, okay, hey, yes, we're in the midst of a retool, but this is a guy that could be the perfect person for this right now and when we get good again. And that's Jim Montgomery for this team. Ken Hitchcock was here for 5+ years. That 6th year is when he ultimately got let go. But he was also at the end of his NHL career at that point. He was 60 when he was hired here in St. Louis. He spent, I think it was 7 years in Dallas before he got fired in that 8th season. I could see something similar for Jim Montgomery here in St. Louis. 6, 7, 8 years, and we'll see where the ultimate success lies. But to me, the Blues always wanted Jim Montgomery. And it became a matter of, when's this guy going to be made available? He became available. You go take your shot. I love the move. It's super aggressive. It's something that we have come to expect with Doug Armstrong, and it's why Blues fans appreciate it so much.
I mean, I love the move as well. It sucks for Drew Bannister. I saw Greg Wyshynski tweet this out, and he said, look, the 3 things that Drew Bannister struggled with this season was having an injury to Broberg and Thomas, goaltending not playing up to expectation, and 3, not being Jim Montgomery. Like, it's a tough spot for Drew Bannister, but it was a team that wasn't performing, and the Blues saw what Doug Armstrong, as Jim Montgomery put it this morning so elegantly, a T-bone steak, and said, I got to go get this guy. And you brought up Ken Hitchcock. The moment Drew Bannister was hired, I said it felt like a Davis Payne type of hire, to where it was like, hey, this is the guy for now. We think this guy can help develop our players. But when they weren't developing, that's when they said, we got to go get the guy. And I brought up the quote again. I said it last week with you. This was from Armstrong when they hired Ken Hitchcock and fired Davis Payne. Quoted, something when I looked at our team and saw the way we were progressing, there were postmarks that you look for in management. I felt we are right now. We needed an experienced coach, someone that could guide this younger team to the area it wants to go. And that's why Jim Montgomery was hired. And I know a lot of people see this and say, 5-year deal, coaches don't last more than 2 years in the NHL. You're right. But if you find the right coach, Ken Hitchcock was that guy. If you find the right coach with the right players that has the correct message, sometimes they can last for a good amount of time. And that's what it felt like the confidence of Doug Armstrong with Jim Montgomery was. He's been around the core that we envision this team winning with now. He was with those guys 3 years ago and had success. He's worked with the best of the best in the NHL when it comes to Tyler Seguin and Joe Pavelski and David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand.
And top-end defensemen as well. Let's not forget what Dallas had whenever he first got there. That was at the very beginning. He was at the rookie season of Miro Heiskanen, helped to develop him into the player that he is today.
Charlie McAvoy he was with, who's still a younger player. Like, this was a coach who encompasses it all as an NHL team. And if you're the Blues, as much of a sucky situation as for Drew Bannister, you don't pass this guy up, because I can almost guarantee you there were 3 or 4 teams also calling Jim Montgomery saying, hey, do you want to come coach our team? Do you want to come coach the Detroit Red Wings, the Montreal Canadiens? And the Blues were like, nope, we need to make this move now, because he will make our team better if the Blues believe they're a playoff team, which all the moves tell you that they do, and he will also make your team good when your team gets those younger players on their roster in the next couple of years.
And I feel for Bannister. This sucks for him, man, but that's what the money is for. Like, this is business. And when somebody became available that was not just a good coach, but this is the guy that the Blues have wanted, it becomes pretty clear at this point that this is who they wanted all along. When that guy became available, what are you going to do? Not go and potentially pursue him because you've got a guy? No, they're going to go try it. They want to upgrade. This is what we all love and appreciate about the Blues. This is why I got frustrated when people were like, I can't talk about this last week. Well, we do it whenever the players underperform. If there's a free agent that's available.
We try and trade guys all the time. BK trades them every day.
If there's a free agent that becomes available on the market, like later today, Chris Kreider's potentially on the trade block. Jacob Trouba potentially on the trade block. You know what we're going to do? We're going to talk about that.
Oh, here we go.
Because that's our job.
Brandon, we're not supposed to talk about that.
So when there's a guy that becomes available on the free agent market, coaching-wise, we're going to talk about that as well, because that is our job. T-Bone, what was your reaction over the weekend?
I wasn't surprised by the move because, I mean, all the tea leaves seem to suggest, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. And it seemed like what you just said. It's clear Montgomery was always the guy that the Blues wanted. I'm skeptical if this is going to work out the way that the Blues envision this, because I've seen this core run out a Stanley Cup champion in Craig Berube as a head coach. And Montgomery, though, maybe that is a guy that will bond with this roster. I'm just skeptical of any coach that gets hired is going to last for 5 years with this roster. So I get it, though. You know, I would have kept Bannister. I understand the thought process for the St. Louis Blues. I still don't think they're in that spot to make this kind of move. But if you truly believe you're going to have one of the 5 best coaches in the NHL, and let's be honest, this is what it takes to last 3+ years in the NHL as a head coach, then yeah, you got to go make the move.
I think they do. I think we've got a top 5 coach in the NHL.
And I think this lasts.
Skeptical of that, but we'll see.
I think this lasts.
You're skeptical that Montgomery is a top 5 coach?
Yeah. I got to see it first. I got to see it here with the Blues. And I know you're going to point to that Bruins season, guys. They lost in the first round of the playoffs
I'm
that year.
not pointing to the Bruins season. I'm pointing to the Bruins seasons and the Dallas Stars seasons.
3 good years. That second year, we know how it ended in Dallas. And then he couldn't make it in Boston.
567 win percentage for the Dallas Stars. 597 win percentage for the Dallas Stars.
Really good there.
823, 665.
You know, I think he had really good rosters in place. This will be his best coaching job here in St. Louis.
Really good roster in place.
And see,
I'm skeptical because, again, he's going to have to really prove it because he's going to have to lead this team out of the dark ages to get them to this spot. So we'll see if he is. Where I'm skeptical is he's going to be here to see them when they're competitive
Who
again.
do you consider to be the 5 best coaches in the league right now?
I'd say John Cooper. I would say, why am I drawing a blank on Colorado's
Jared
guy?
Well,
Bednar.
why is Bednar
Rod
better than
Labad.
Montgomery when Bednar is doing this with a really talented roster as well?
Well, he's been able to stick around. You know, Jim Montgomery couldn't stick around in Boston. That's my point.
I guess we just see it differently. Boston fired him for being at a 500 points percentage.
Well,
he got a raw deal in Boston, in my opinion.
And the Boston thing is different from the John Cooper. When John Cooper was brought into Tampa Bay, that team was not good. And they said, hey, you're going to have to go through some lean years. They got their draft picks, and then you started to win. Boston, they brought Jim Montgomery in to win right now with an aging core of players where they said, you probably got 2 or 3 years left to win. And he did. He did win the first 2 years. You just fell victim to the Florida Panthers, and then I forgot who they lost to in their first season where he was with Boston. And then they looked at this and said, well, we got to Florida first year. Who was then this past year?
I think it was Florida.
So you lost to Florida in back-to-back years. Okay, so you lost to the team that got to the Stanley.
Like unbelievable, can't adjust and beat the same team.
But
in the
you
playoffs.
lost to the team that got to the Stanley Cup final and then won it the next year. But what I'm saying is the Boston Bruins said this guy needs to win us a Stanley Cup. But what they didn't recognize was their roster wasn't built to win a Stanley Cup. What the Blues are doing is what John Cooper was, where they brought him in and they said, now John Cooper wasn't established at the time like Montgomery, but they said, hey, our team is good, but we're waiting to get great. We need you to help us get great. And that's why you bring in a Jim Montgomery.
I think he's a top 5 coach. I think this was a can't miss situation. And I got to give a lot of respect to the ownership group as well. Because there are so many franchises across professional sports, not just in the NHL. When your president of hockey operations comes out, Alex, and says, hey, we're in the midst of a retool. We're going to go through a retool right now. A lot of the owners are standing around like, standing ovation. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's pocket that money. We don't have to spend for the next couple of years. This is going to be great, right? This is the dirty little secret about Major League Baseball teams that go through the rebuild. Ownerships love it. Because they're just making money hand over fist. We're not going to spend on our payroll. We're going to be able to relax for a couple of years, take a few extra vacations. It's going to be great. Meanwhile, here in St. Louis, a retool means going out and sending out multiple offer sheets, spending above the cap because of the LTIR money that you've got now with Torrey Krug, and now you're going to go pay multiple coaches to be a part of this team. What they have decided to do is going to be much more costly than what it could have been for the ownership group. And that all has to get okayed by the ownership group. So credit to Stillman and his entire group for making that possible. Blues fans should be very appreciative of the fact that they've got an ownership group that's willing to invest in a time where it would have been more than understandable if they said no.
Yeah, well, I mean, because how many places are willing to even listen to a conversation from a general manager when they say, hey, we're going to bring in an extra $6 million this season, and we're also going to put the guy that's making $6.5 million on LTIR. So, like, you cool with $12-13 million that you're going to have to spend this year? Most owners would be like, hell no, start shipping guys out.
Are we going to make it to the Stanley Cup final? Because if so, yeah, that sounds awesome. If not, why am I spending?
And that is credit to Tom Stillman because he every single season, once a competitive team says go out there and put the most competitive team on the ice that you can. And when he took this Blues team over, you had to build that back up. They've built it back up. And now you're talking about bringing in success in terms of the business side of it, but also letting a general manager, a president of hockey operations go out there and do what he believes can make this team successful.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The YouTube chat off and running today. It is the Graveyard Chat at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. Want to hear from you throughout the day today. Coming up at the end of this hour, we'll get into our questions and answer segment. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and get them in right now. But coming up next, I mentioned Pavel Buchnevich with some interesting comments after the game on Saturday. Were these the comments that were able to portend what was about to come? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So the Blues did play a hockey game on Saturday night. It didn't go well. They lost 3-1 against the New York Islanders. They're back in action, by the way, tonight. The first game that we will see Jim Montgomery back behind the bench for the St. Louis Blues. Pre-game with Alex starts at 5 o'clock. Puck drop for the Blues versus the Rangers at Madison Square Garden tonight at 6. Alex, after the game on Saturday, a game that was not well played offensively by the Blues, especially for the first 2 periods, Pavel Buchnevich had some really compelling comments. The first thing that he said is that the Blues have to figure out their offense. Here's what he had to say.
We'll see. I don't know. We score 2 goals a game. We can win the games like that. What's our goal? We have to stop 50 shots every game. It's impossible. Our teams have good players, and we're scoring. We got to figure out offense. Offense is our biggest issues. Impossible to win with 1 and 2 goals. I know it doesn't work on that. We're working on this zone. We got to start working on the offense, believing we can score. It's hard to win in this league like 2-1 and 1-0. I think we play defensively much better than last year, but it doesn't create any chances offensively. It's our biggest issues right now. It's probably the lowest team in goals.
There's a lot there.
He's right.
There's a lot there. And I know Booch, listen, he's got a very strong accent, so if you didn't, totally get that. We score 2 goals a game. Can't win games like that. Goalies have to stop 50 shots every game. It's impossible. Team has good players. We're just not scoring. We got to figure out offense. Offense is our biggest issue. Agree with everything you just said there.
12 of their 22 games that they have played, this team has scored 2 or fewer goals.
There it is.
50% of your season has been 2 or fewer goals.
He then continued when asked, okay, you guys did play a little better offensively in that 3rd period. What changed for you?
We changed the breakout and we start playing better. At least we got the speed on breakout. When we dump the puck, every time we dump the puck, first period, we get the puck back and we just chasing puck around. As soon as we change the breakout, at least we enter the zone with the speed and we can for checking.
He added one more comment, Alex. We don't have this audio, but I'll read it for you. He said, quote, I don't know. Offensively, we don't work on it. We only work on our defensive zone. We've got to start working on offense, believing that we can score. It's hard to win in this league 2-1 or 1-0. I think we play defensively much better than last year, but we don't create any offensive chances. It's our biggest issue right now, probably the lowest team. Alex, when I heard this on Saturday night, my immediate thought was, uh-oh. That doesn't sound good, because the stuff that we started hearing about, kind of murmurs around the team, now is being stated publicly. Now they're starting to call out, this is coaching, man. We can talk about, there are player issues in here as well. They have personnel problems. I do not believe that this is going to be an offensive-minded team at any point. I don't believe that. At least not right now with the current players that they have on it. But when he says, we don't work on offense, we only work on defensive zones, that is coaching. When he says we don't believe in our offense, our biggest issue is that we don't have a self-belief in what we're doing offensively, it's coaching. That's instilling confidence in your players. And so that, to me, that is priority number 1 for Jim Montgomery, is getting the confidence back for some of these guys that are struggling right now offensively.
Yeah, I mean, there are times this season that when the Blues are in the offensive zone, it feels like they don't have a game plan. It feels like they'll get in, and Pavel Buchnevich's point, you dump the puck, you go chase after it, and if you don't get it, well, now you're playing chase hockey for the longevity of your shift. There's no crispness to these zone entries and then setting things up. If you watch the Minnesota Wild when the Blues played against them, or when you watch against some of these top-tier teams that they've played against, Carolina, for example, man, when they get into the zone, there's a plan. And even after that game on Saturday, Drew Bannister was talking about it. It's look, we get into the zone, and then there's no effort to get to the front of the net. And then if there's no effort to get to the front of the net, well, there's no effort to get the pucks to the front of the net. Some of that's player initiative to where you're looking for that perfect pass, but it also just feels a lot like there's no game plan of what to do. And I don't know what that is, because I'm not the X's and O's in terms of hockey coaching, but for a team that has the talent, and I know there's a lot of people that don't believe they have the talent to be a better offensive team, you've got a Robert Thomas, a Kyrou, a Pavel Buchnevich, a Jake Neighbors. These are all guys that a lot of people view as top-tier players in the NHL.
Or at least at a minimum, good players.
They shouldn't be averaging 2 goals per game half of the season. So I don't know if Jim Montgomery just snaps his fingers and all of a sudden this team becomes an offensive juggernaut. Frankly, I wouldn't bet on that. But there's got to be an emphasis on what to do when you get into the offensive zone, because you can keep saying dump the puck and retrieve the puck along the boards, but at some point you're going to have to do something else with it, and that's where it seems like this team is just lacking.
Yeah, and I can understand where maybe there is a little bit of a lack of a plan, and that is going to be the key for Montgomery. I mean, really, the guys that he has to try and impose confidence in is one of them that you said in Pavel Buchnevich, because Buch just hasn't played to his level that we've expected from him. And maybe part of that was playing the center position. But, like, I still think they're going to be a 2.5 goals per game team, because I just don't see the offensive upside in this squad. Because, I mean, the three guys that you mentioned, they've got 3 legitimate goal scorers: Thomas, Buch, Kyrou. Outside of that, I mean, Neighbors, but I don't really view him as a legitimate goal scorer. He's kind of parked in front of the net, and we'll see where he ends up. Outside of that, though,
but that's fair.
Outside of that, though, it's just a bunch of third-liners, right? Like Saad, Shen, third-liners probably on a contender. Holloway, Joseph, those guys, third-liners. Bolduc, probably a third-liner. Like, that's a team that's just not going to score no matter who it is that's there. Now, if there are questions of, hey, did they focus enough on offense at practice? Okay, that's fair then. In defense of Bannister, I can get where he kind of leans into, hey, if we're going to win hockey games, it's kind of how me and BK talked about going into the year. They're going to have to play shutdown defensive hockey games, because I just don't see there being much of an offensive ceiling for this team.
Agreed, but there has to be confidence.
Sure.
And this is something where, like, I think about this with the Cardinals, right? The hitting coach, he can't go up there with the bat. He can't tell them exactly what they need to be planning for. Everybody's got their own individualized plan when they go up to the plate, and it's the old Mike Tyson phrase, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, when you see a 97-mile-an-hour fastball with a crazy slider coming off of it, and every pitcher in the league seems to have a changeup right now, like, good luck. And now you got to figure out what you're going to do whenever you go up there. You can have all of the work you want pregame. It's about whether or not you're going to execute. And a lot of guys, once they go up to the plate, they lack any sort of confidence. Well, that is the part that I do believe a hitting coach can help with. Do you go up to the plate confident? That's half the battle, dude. And it feels like, to me, and especially after hearing these comments, the Blues don't have confidence. They are almost like questioning whether or not they're going to be able to get into the zone, much less when they get into the zone, do they have a plan? Are they going to be in the right places at the right times? And what are those places? Because if you don't have a game plan, how can I know for certain where my teammates are going to be? And then suddenly you're trying to, like, almost make the extra pass because you're trying to get the best chance possible because you don't know when the next one's going to come, instead of just directing pucks on net and saying, let's just get after it, dude. Like, let's go. And that, I don't know what percentage of that is on Bannister, but it's not zero. Some of that has to go back to the coaching staff. And whether that's a reflection of him, the entire staff, whatever, that is something that Jim Montgomery has to change immediately. They have got to instill confidence back in this group because they're clearly lacking it right now. There are teams in the NHL that have less talent offensively than the Blues do, that are scoring more often than the Blues are right now. That shouldn't be happening. And that needs to get figured out immediately. They're 30th in the league right now in scoring, man. Like, they're the only 2 teams in the league that are scoring less often than the Blues. This ain't going to help my argument. 1, Chicago. 2, Boston. Unfortunately, Boston's at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to scoring right now.
Top 5 coach.
By the way, they wrote an article in Boston saying they're going to need more than a coaching change to help this roster.
They have serious roster issues right now. The Blues do as well. The Blues are not a completely finished product. But they've got to figure out, how do we get more of those high-danger chances? It's something that Jim Montgomery has been really good at in his NHL career, is finding ways to get those high-danger chances. The Blues don't do it right now.
I think, to your point about the confidence, there's got to, some of that confidence for the players comes from the trust of the coach. And Drew Bannister has emphasized the defensive side of things. For example, late in games, you're putting shutdown guys out there rather than the guys that are trying to generate offense. And although I've defended some of the decisions, like a Jordan Kyrou not out there late in game when you need to get it to overtime, there have been circumstances where Oscar Sundquist gets thrown out there on the top line, or Radek Faksa gets thrown out there on the top line, and they're skipping over other lines. Just as much as it's on the confidence from the players, there is some element to trust from the coach to let guys go out there and kind of unleash their creativity on the ice. And that is something that we saw Jim Montgomery be a part of when he was on the bench with Craig Berube when they were here in years past.
Yeah, here's my question of the whole confidence argument. And I think there is some of that is being played out right now, that there is a lack of confidence. my question is how much of that is just because they're losing right now, right? Of between wins and losses. Because when you're winning, it's a lot easier to have confidence, even if you're not playing good offensively, right? Like we've seen teams that play. I'm thinking of Carolina because they always are a team that I remember as, hey, they get in on the forecheck, they just play an aggressive game, but they win these games 2-1, right? They would tell you they're playing with confidence, but how much of that is tied into just the fact that they're winning compared to losing?
I think some of that, though, is about their plan, right? Like, if I ask anybody, hey, how do the Carolina Hurricanes play? Every single person knows how they play.
Yeah.
Every single person.
There's
Fans,
one identity.
media, team, like everybody involved knows the moment that they watch a Carolina Hurricanes game, what they're getting. When you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers, what's it going to look like? You know what it's going to look like.
Boring.
Yeah, for sure. But you know, right? You know what that's going to look like. Unfortunately for the Blues, offensively, I know what it's going to look like, but it is not a positive description that I'm going to give you about how the Blues play offensively. What Montgomery has to figure out is, okay, what can it look like? What is the peak of this offense? It might be 17th in the league, and that's fine. It can't be 30th. If this team is going to max out at 30th best in the league with these offensive players, well, then it's time to get new players. And you have to go about it a different way. And T-Bone, I think that's what you're saying is like it might just be a roster problem, and that's fine. That's a reasonable take to have.
That's where I am.
Fair. I can't say that right now because I think that there might have been a coaching problem also. And if there is a coaching problem, I got to fix that first, eliminate that variable because I want to find out what I have internally. And then if I then need to make changes, I can go do that in the offseason. But for now, give me 60 games to play with Jim Montgomery as the head coach to see what that looks like. I agree with you. They need a second line center. We've said all along, they need a top line winger. I would be aggressive in going out and trying to find those pieces, whether it's now, deadline, or the offseason. And I think that's going to fix this far more than any one coach can. But you got to be better than 30th in the league in scoring. That can't be the case for this team.
And it's hard to be a team and look at them anywhere other than where they're at on the offensive side when one of their best goal scorers or supposedly best goal scorers is playing a position that he's not comfortable with and not involved in the offense. I mean, you hear the frustration on Pavel Buchnevich's voice talking about this offense. In 19 games this season, this guy has 2 goals. He was separated with 2 goals where it was 13 games and then 6 games. So, like, getting a little bit more confidence to a Pavel Buchnevich creates a lot more offense for this team. And then we're also, I mean, they skipped over a couple of line combinations with guys like Holloway and Bolduc and Joseph. And although you might believe they're third liners, we came into the season believing they would contribute to the offense. And when they're playing 8 minutes a night, it's hard to contribute to an offense. This team has gotten into the identity of we score 2 goals and then we're going to shut it down the rest of the way. And you can't play that way.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument, but I just look at this roster, and like with Buchnevich, if you get him going, I still don't know if you really raise your ceiling a ton. Now, it probably does move up to like that 25th, 20th range that you're talking about. I just think this is who they are.
20th in the league right now is 2.75 goals per game. You're at 2.35. You should be able to.
And if I had to guess like where I think they will finish offensively this year, and we'll see what it looks like under Montgomery, and look, caveat here, I think there is going to be like a 10-game kind of new coach bump for a team. We see it all the time. I think they'll probably be a 25 or below offense by the time we get done with this season.
And I think that's the question. That becomes a question of if they become or if they finish around that range, then it's a player issue. And you got to improve. And whether that means changing out the core or going out and just getting a second line center, adding a top line winger, those are the things that this team needs to look at. He's Alex's T-Bone. I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers coming up in about 15 minutes. Coming up next, time for some NFL quick hitters in a weird weekend in the NFL. A weekend that I thought was going to be pretty lackadaisical and sleepy, especially in the noon slate, became one of the best Sundays that we've seen thus far. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Ted Drew's, that famous frozen custard that has been people have been enjoying for 95 years. 4 generations of families have been serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard, and it's your opportunity to get out there now and enjoy the festivities that are around the holiday season, because they've got their Christmas trees out there. That parking lot is going to be able, you can walk through and check out all the Christmas trees that you'd want. On top of it, you can go get that famous frozen custard and enjoy that while you create those family traditions. So every Christmas, it'll be, let's go out to Ted Drew's, let's walk around the parking lot, let's get some famous frozen custard and check out the Christmas trees. While you're out there, get some Christmas shopping done as well. Walk across the parking lot and check out their gift shop at Ted Drew's, where you could buy Ted Drew's apparel, you could buy Ted Drew's souvenirs, and of course, Ted Drew's gift cards, everything to wrap up your holiday shopping list over at Ted Drew's. So get on out there this weekend, get out there today, and enjoy Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Ted Drew's, it really is good guys and gals.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Over the weekend, the St. Louis Blues made a coaching change as they fired head coach Drew Bannister and hired Jim Montgomery, signing him to a 5-year deal. And Jim Montgomery will make his coaching debut with the St. Louis Blues tonight as they visit the New York Rangers. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Gerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
What a patently absurd week in the NFL. Just absolutely ridiculous. I thought this was going to be a snoozer of a week, Alex. You looked at the noon slate especially.
Yeah, I did leaf pickup in my backyard in the noon slate.
It was like, all right, a bunch of these games are going to be blowouts, and the ones that aren't, I'm not all that interested in to begin with. And then it was anything but. The opposite happened. Suddenly, we got to the end of the noon slate. It was like 3:15, and Red Zone's just going berserk. You've got like a 6-box going on with the Cowboys-Commanders game coming down to the wire. The last 3 minutes of that were ridiculous. Vikings-Bears was awesome. Chiefs-Panthers suddenly was interesting. Let's start here. Open-ended question. What was the biggest surprise to you yesterday with what we saw in the NFL?
Man, I don't know how you go past the Chiefs and Panthers.
I've got another one that surprised me more.
It might be mine because mine was the Texans and Titans.
That was not mine, but that one also was up there.
I almost bet them with our pick'em because I'm like, the Titans are awful. But apparently
did pick them.
We didn't have to talk about it.
You dummy. But apparently the Texans are awful too. Like they've got an offense that I don't know what to do with. And frankly, they brought in pieces on defense that I was like, oh, this team's going to be really good. They'll be improved, kind of like what Detroit has been. Nope. They have been bad in every single facet of their game. Part of me wonders what's going on with D'Amico Ryans because, like, he was not this bad of a coach last season. So that was the one that was most surprising to me because right now there are 2 Super Bowl contenders in the AFC, and then everyone else, I'm kind of the shoulder shrug emoji.
So mine was on the NFC side of things, a team that about halfway through the season, we were all like, oh, wow, okay, they're not only interesting, they're real, they're a contender. The Washington Commanders lost at home against the Dallas Cowboys, dude. And not just the Dallas Cowboys, but the Dallas Cowboys with Cooper Rush, who I thought 3 weeks ago gave up on their season. And now they're scoring 34 against you, and you're doing everything possible to find a way to lose the game. Your kicker misses the extra point. You give up a kick return touchdown, and then you give up an onside recovery touchdown. Like, the stuff that happened in that game was bananas. The Commanders, to me, are going in the same direction as the Texans right now. They both, about halfway through the season, looked like Super Bowl contenders, and now I'm wondering if either are even going to make the playoffs. Like, it's getting real bad for both of those 2 teams, respectively. So my biggest surprise was at home, just like the Texans, the Commanders losing against Dallas. T-Bone, what else lived up to that expectation for you?
Well,
biggest surprise.
Mine would be the fact that Bryce Young looks like a franchise caliber quarterback. Now, when I say that, I don't mean like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, but can he be like top 15 in that 15 to 20 range? Like, Bryce Young looked good yesterday against the Kansas City Chiefs.
He looked yesterday like Bo Nix looked against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a good thing. That's like the 17th best quarterback in the league, which is a huge upgrade from the 38th best quarterback in the league, which Bryce Young has been previously.
And we were ready to give up on Bryce Young after he got benched once again for the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, and he went up against the best defense in the NFL, and he was able to throw for 263 yards, had a touchdown, quarterback rating of 92.9. Like, he looked good, and it makes me wonder if, okay, maybe there still is a future for him. The Chiefs ended up having that game be 1 score. That's the Chiefs' MO for some reason. Why, I don't really know.
They like those close games.
Apparently. But the fact that Bryce Young looked really good in that game was an encouraging sign and honestly a big surprise for me over the weekend.
I don't think anybody was shocked that the 49ers lost to the Packers on the road yesterday after it was announced that Brock Purdy was going to miss the game.
Not me if I would have known.
Yeah, this is
T-Bone taking the day off.
T-Bone took the day off on Friday, so we didn't know at the time of our pick that Purdy was going to be out. Didn't feel like it was trending in that direction. And then suddenly you wake up on Sunday, Purdy's out. Trent Williams out. Yeah. The entire defense, literally all 4 starters on the defensive line were out in this one. So nobody was shocked that they lost against the Packers, but they didn't just lose. They got their ass kicked. 38-10 on the road. Jacobs ran all over their defense. They had no chance in this one, guys. The 49ers are now 5-6. They are only a game out, but they have like 3 teams between them and the postseason. And here's their final 6 weeks of the NFL season. At Buffalo, home against a Chicago team that's playing some inspired ball. They played really well yesterday against Minnesota. Home against the Rams, who are going to be battling for a spot. At Miami, who suddenly is the walking zombies. They've got a chance to be able to make it to the playoffs now. Home against Detroit, and on the road against Arizona, who looked really bad yesterday, but they are a playoff caliber team. Is it over for this version of the 49ers, in your opinion? The Brock Purdy, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, stud defensive line, Kyle Shanahan, Trent Williams, like this entire group, this core group of players, is it over for that version of the 49ers as a Super Bowl threat, Alex?
I think so. I think they're the worst team in their division. I would put the Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams ahead of the 49ers right now, and I know the Rams kind of got their butts kicked last night, too.
Yeah, we did.
But I think their chance of winning a Super Bowl with this group was the last couple of years, and they missed their chance. And now you're looking at an opportunity to where you might be stuck with a lot of these position players because you've kind of laid this bed that these are the guys that are going to get us back there. I don't view any element of the 49ers as dangerous anymore. Again, I understand a lot of their defensive players were out, but they haven't been a scary defense at all this season. I know you've been without McCaffrey and Ayuk and Debo Samuel for a while. They still haven't been a threatening offense. I would be a lot more scared of taking on the Seahawks, Cardinals, or even the Rams right now than I would be the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, I think it's done for this core. Now, maybe they still kind of sneak in this year, but I'm skeptical of that. I don't think you're going to see them as the NFC kind of power that they were because, everybody will say, well, it's just a year of hell, with injuries. Yeah, but these guys are getting older, and they've dealt with stuff in the past. It's not like this is the first year where Debo's been hurt. It's not the first year McCaffrey's dealt with injuries. So I think, you're seeing the end of the San Francisco 49ers as that true power in the NFC with this core.
I'm in agreement. I think we all said coming into the season, this is it. Last year, you're pushing here. See what it looks like. And they went all in on it. They paid their guys. They got Ayuk back in the door, and just has not gone the way that anybody expected it to. I think it's over, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think they're done. I'm not sure Purdy's playing next week. After hearing the way that they're talking about him, this feels like it's a more significant injury than they were leading on. Who could have seen that coming? 49ers not being forthright about injuries. Not that they would ever do that.
Yeah.
Also, Christian McCaffrey doesn't look great.
No.
He's very clearly doesn't have the burst that he did a year ago, so I think they are done in this version. All right, last thing here. Kansas City Chiefs, we got to talk about it.
No, man, it's fine.
For the first time in a calendar year, they scored at least 30 points in regulation. Didn't need overtime. They got to 30 without going to overtime for the first time in literally a calendar year. And all anybody's going to talk about today, deservingly so, is that they needed a field goal again as time expired to be able to beat the hapless Panthers. So over the past 4 weeks, they needed overtime to beat the Bucks. The Chiefs needed a blocked field goal in order to beat the Broncos, a last-second field goal to beat the Panthers, and they lost by 2 scores against the Bills. Panic meter. What's your level of concern at this point, Alex, about the Kansas City Chiefs? This is ridiculous. I know. They're 10-1. They have the number 1 seed right now currently in the AFC, but we're still doing this of, are the Chiefs a fraud? Alex, what's your level of concern right now?
On a scale of 1 to 10, a 1. Like, I really don't care what they do in the regular season. And honestly, I think all of the players would say the same thing. You're kind of just sleepwalking through the regular season because you know how to flip the switch when you get to postseason. It's concerning that Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked great all year, although I thought he looked fine yesterday.
Yeah.
But you're still without Isaiah Pacheco. You're without one of your top weapons on the offensive side. But again, none of this matters because Travis Kelce just needs 4 games to be elite. Patrick Mahomes needs 4 games to be elite.
And maybe 2.
Yeah, and this defense, this defense can go toe-to-toe with a lot of teams. I know that the Panthers just scored, but we all agree Steve Spagnuolo knows what the hell he's doing on the field. So I really don't care what they do in the regular season because postseason is where you're going to have to answer the bell.
I'm at a 3.
I'm at like a 4.
Because they do have issues.
How am I the lowest?
They have a tackle problem. and I'm not sure that can be solved in season.
Yeah.
They have a receiver problem. I think that can be solved in season. I think Kelsey, by the time that you get to the postseason, is going to look like himself. I think they're going to figure this thing out with Xavier Worthy. DeAndre Hopkins, I think they're keeping his snap count low because they don't want to give up a 4th-round pick. They want to give up a 5th-round pick for him. And if he stays below 60% on the season, they give up the 5th, not
and then
the 4th.
it'll go off on the postseason.
I think that's what's happening right now.
Smart.
Oh, I hate them.
They're going to get Isaiah Pacheco back, which helps them add an explosive element to their running game, which has been really lacking lately. We're seeing Mahomes raise his game again, especially in the highest leverage moments. So I'm not worried about all that stuff. The tackle situation, little concerning. More importantly, though, they have a problem in their secondary, man. Their corners outside of Trent McDuffie are not just bad, they're horrific. And we've seen them overcome these kinds of issues in the past, and that's why I'm at like a 2 or a 3 on my level of concern. Spags will find a way by the end of the season to figure out what exactly he needs to do, but it's not nothing when Bryce Young is doing this against your defense, and when Bo Nix is doing it against your defense, and Baker Mayfield did it against your defense with none of his weapons available. Teams are finding ways to exploit what they have right now in the secondary, and they have nobody coming back. This is what they've got. So that, to me, is the biggest concern, and there are quarterbacks in the AFC that can exploit that, whether it's Lamar or Justin Herbert or Josh Allen or, hell, Bo Nix. There are guys that can do that, so it's not nothing to me. It's also not rising to the level where it's like any kind of panic. I still think they're the favorite to win the AFC.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I'm at like a 4. I mean, all the issues you just brought up, they're there, and they are worth keeping an eye on, but I'm not going to bet against Patrick Mahomes when you get to the playoffs. And, you know, you mentioned, well, all these close games, blocked field goal, you know, they have to have a walk-off field goal against Carolina. Hey, man, did you win or lose? That's what it comes down to in the NFL. And you know what? They're finding ways to win. Though it ain't the prettiest, it's a matter of, do you find a way to win? And I do believe you're going to see that offense get to another level by the time you get to the postseason.
I think they blow out Vegas on Friday.
Whoa.
They don't blow
I told
anybody
you guys
out
last
anymore.
week, they're not going to blow out Carolina. Everybody's predicting it. It's not happening. They scored more than I expected. I do think they will blow out Las Vegas because they're highly motivated in this spot, and it's a home game. The Chargers game is the one that I'm really curious about. That's the following week. You get 10 days to prepare for it. You're going to see the best version of Steve Spagnuolo, because that game actually matters for the Chiefs, especially if the Chargers end up winning tonight. That could be for like the 1 seed, strangely enough, in the AFC. But this is the week that I think you see the offense go off, and I think you see a much better version of the defense going up against likely Desmond Ridder on Friday. Oof, not a great Black Friday game.
Make it your pick 'em right now. 3-point play. Make it.
I don't know I haven't seen what the line is on that game.
Blind pick.
My bet is it's like 7.5.
Blind
Let's
pick.
see.
What's your
Let's
guess?
see.
I'm going to check it out right now.
9.5.
Whoa. 13.5.
Make it, Mr. Bull.
Yeah.
Make
Make
it.
it your
I
3-point
guarantee
play.
they're
If
going
it's
to
a
blow out
blowout.
the Vegas Raiders.
That would be a blowout.
Yeah, they blow them out. They'll
Make
cover.
it.
Do it.
Say it with your chest.
I might do it. All right, coming up next, we'll get into
You
questions
don't
and
touch
answers
that.
here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. Now that things are starting to get real cold, and I mean real cold over these next couple of days, you need to get Classic Air Care out to check out your unit. Whether it's an old one or a brand new one, you have them come out and be a part of their maintenance agreement. And what that is, they come out, they check things, they clean things, they make sure you're good to go to get you through the season that is upon us. And that's what I love about Classic Air Care. I've been a part of their maintenance agreement since 2016. They've taken care of 2 units that we've had that were over the age of 25, and both of those are because of Classic Air Care. They've been making people comfortable since 1926. So what you do is you schedule this maintenance agreement, they come out, they check it for you, and then twice a year they come out because you're a part of that agreement. And if things arise, if issues come up over the next few months, well, then you get priority on their maintenance agreement list. So when you call, they get you on the schedule, first come, first serve. That's what I love about Classic Air Care. They take care of their current customers. Give them a call today or tell them Alex Ferrario sent you online. It's Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in there or get them in on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Let's start out with this from the 618. Guys, the Cardinals are potentially going to be looking for trades this offseason. Do you think they should consider Cody Bellinger to play center field or first base? I'm not interested at all.
Yeah, you got to... Where are you at as a team? Last
We
year
wanna
or
win.
2 years ago? Well, if that's true, then go get Cody Bellinger. But no, I don't
I'm not
think...
interested either way.
I would bring him in if you were a team that believed you could compete. Because
At his money?
Yeah. Yeah. If this team was willing to spend money. But I think his bat would play, and he plays two positions that you're kind of in need of right now, first base and center field.
I think Cody Bellinger was a mirage 2 years ago. This past season, I think you saw some of that. I would not be interested in him at his current deal. If they were willing to pay down some of the money, then maybe I would be willing to take it on. But as is, no, sir. I am A-okay. He was basically last year what you're getting out of Lars Nootbaar. And you don't need to add another one of those guys, but without as much on-base percentage. So, yeah, I'm good. I'm good on Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, I think if they were contending and the Cubs would eat some money, then I'm with you. I would show some interest because I think he's a major upgrade in center field for you and provide some offense, but it's not enough, and I don't think he'll get back to 2023. So if the Cubs wouldn't eat money, then no chance I would have done it, and there's no chance the Cardinals are going to do it in a retool.
From the 314, guys, is this the end of Jordan Kyrou? I'm thinking 68 games max. If he continues the way that he's been for the last 3 years, he's gone. He's very much not a Jim Montgomery player. What does that mean?
No, he very much is a Jim Montgomery player. He was
What
Jim
is a
Montgomery's
Jim Montgomery player?
and well, that's the first question you got to ask. But I think people heard his quote about how we got to get this team back to being a blue-collar squad because that's what the Blues are. Yeah, that's the identity. But Jordan Kyrou had his best season playing under Craig Berube and Jim Montgomery. So if you're going to sit there and say, what, he's not a Jim Montgomery type of player. I mean, Jim Montgomery just had, 60-something wins with David Pastrnak, who was all offense? No, that's ridiculous.
I don't know why you'd get rid of Kyrou because he's having his best season of his career, I think, so far under Bannister. But whatever. But I don't see the I don't see the need. I haven't really even seen the frustrations from Kyrou outside the couple of turnovers, which have been highlighted. But I haven't seen a lot of the the lackadaisical skating, if you will, at times where he's not getting in on the back check. I've seen him getting back in the zone, helping out defensively, making a couple of good back checking plays. So I don't really get the frustration from Jordan Kyrou this year. Typical last couple of years, I've understood it to an extent. This year, I don't really get it at all.
You know where I stand on this.
Get rid of him.
Where? You want to trade him?
You're always willing to trade the best Blues players like Barbie,
Yeah, you're always wanting to trade guys, man.
Dunn.
He got the best version of John Klingberg, who's a terrible defenseman and only plays offense. He might as well be a forward. And we've seen that basically since he left Dallas, as everybody else that he's played for was like, whoa, no. We're not doing this. But when he was with Jim Montgomery, he was a really good player. People thought was on the verge of earning himself a pretty sizable contract. You got Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, pretty good numbers while he was there. I guess I'm a little confused as well. I don't know why Jordan Kyrou wouldn't be considered a Jim Montgomery
I just think it's because
player.
people want Jordan Kyrou gone, and that's not going to happen.
Unless a Brady Tkachuk becomes available.
Yeah, if a deal falls into their laps, that makes sense. But I mean, they had a Tkachuk available to them, and they opted to stick with the Jordan Kyrou. For better or for worse, they have invested in Jordan Kyrou. And even Doug Armstrong talked about this in the offseason. It's look, there was plenty of Blues in the past that people despised until they had their big moment, and then everybody was on board. Jay Bomeister is a perfect example. You got to stop breaking down the Jordan Kyrou pre-Berube firing and the minus 38 and look at the Jordan Kyrou now. And it is a different Jordan Kyrou, and you're bringing in a head coach that did get the best of Jordan Kyrou when he was a part of their team.
He's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Coming up next, speaking of Kyrou, the Blues top players are now on notice because now that they have made another change at head coach, the place that all of the speculation, all of the criticism is going to go towards, it's on the players. Now it's up to them to perform. Some people have said this should have been the case with Bannister. I think that this is a totally reasonable way for the Blues to go about it, and I'll explain it next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley for our friends over at Circa Sports in Illinois. Alex, when we bet exclusively with Circa because we are getting the best odds possible. Monday Night Football tonight, I've made it known. I like the Chargers in this game. I like them on the money line. They're plus 2.5 over on FanDuel, plus 3 actually over on Circa. And if I'm betting the money line, I'm getting better odds over on Circa. Plus 135 there. If I was betting on FanDuel and they recommend check out all the lines elsewhere, you're going to come back to Circa because they've got the best odds possible. Plus 125 over there. I win the most money possible with Circa Sports.
You need to be putting these parlays together. You need to be doing these future bets put together over on Circa Sports Illinois. Like BK mentioned, you're bringing in the most money possible. They're so confident they tell you to go check out those other sports betting apps because they know you'll be right back to it. Here's a great example. Tonight, of course, with the Blues and Jim Montgomery, I'm putting together a 2-leg parlay. You put it together on Circa Sports, a Blues money line win and the over 6 goals. If you do that on any other sports booking apps, you bring in $42 on a $10 bet. You do it on Circa Sports, you're bringing in $50. That's the money that you're bringing in thanks to Circa Sports Illinois. So download it today. Put your parlays together. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So the players are now the ones that are going to be going under the microscope, Alex. It is no longer about the head coach. I think there were real open-ended questions. It's a place that me, T-Bone, and Alex, I mean, differing opinions on this. Alex and I on one side, T-Bone on another. I think there were open-ended questions as to whether or not Drew Bannister was the right guy for this job. I don't think he was a terrible coach. I have no idea, though, if he was ever going to become a good coach at the NHL level. And I think that's something that the Blues said, okay, this is a variable that we're going to go ahead and eliminate. We know Jim Montgomery is a good head coach. We've seen it with Boston. We've seen it in Dallas. We saw when he was here, he was an excellent assistant coach for the Blues as well. This guy comes in with pedigree. This guy comes in with a winning success basically everywhere that he's been. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. Knock that off the list of things that are potential question marks for the Blues. They've got a top-line center in Robert Thomas. They've got a top 6 forward in Pavel Buchnevich and in Jordan Kyrou. Not sure where, but top 6 nonetheless. We got a top pair defenseman with Parayko. We got a number 1 goalie, number 2 goalie. We got another defenseman eventually that's going to come in and be a top 4 guy for us when Broberg is back healthy. We are knocking these things out one by one, spots in our lineup that we feel good about. Well, now we can cross or check the box for head coach that we don't have to worry about. Alex, now that means that it eliminates another variable and it puts the pressure, it puts the onus back on the players. You can't complain about the coach anymore, Booch, in your post-game interviews. Now it's going to be, are you guys executing on the ice? Is that how you viewed this with the announcement that took place yesterday as the St. Louis Blues have hired Jim Montgomery?
Yeah, as I was listening to the Doug Armstrong press conference, I just couldn't help but think that you give a 5-year deal to Jim Montgomery and you essentially are saying, we've got the guy now. The variables are all off the table. This is the guy that is going to be a part of our team moving forward. So either get on board and show us your best with Jim Montgomery, or we will make changes elsewhere. And the quote that Doug Armstrong had, and I'm paraphrasing with this one, but he essentially said, like, look, we have put together a roster that we believe can compete, and now we've brought in the head coach that erases all variables. We got a guy who we know can coach at the NHL level, hence his, like, what, 890 win percentage that he had the 1 year with the Boston Bruins. He set an individual season record in the National Hockey League for coaching with Boston. We know we got a guy who knows how to do the X's and O's. Now the pressure is on the players, and it's on myself and Alexander Steen to go out there and put the best roster we can so that they go out there and win a Stanley Cup. So the first thing I thought of was, yeah, this is a spotlight that's now directed back towards the players. I kind of match this to when they fired Mike Yeo and brought in Craig Berube. When they brought in Craig Berube, Doug talked a lot about independent contractors on the roster. And I'm not saying it's the same scenario there, but he essentially said, this is the last time we'll be talking about the coach with this roster, because if the coach doesn't get this roster, then the roster will be changed. And remember, they almost got rid of that roster before the 11-game win streak.
I think some of the talk of the Blues having this like coaching carousel where it's like, hey, come on for a year. Let's go. It'll be a fun ride together. I think it's kind of nonsense, honestly. They stuck with Ken Hitchcock up until they couldn't stick with him any longer, and it became clear, hey, it's time for a change.
He was retiring at the end of that season.
So much so, by the way, that they had the next guy in place already. Like, it had already been announced, similar to what's taking place right now with Army and Alex Steen. It just became clear, hey, this is not a working relationship that's going to be able to continue. So they went with the next guy. And when Mike Yeo had clearly run its course, said, okay, we got to change something because this is a championship level roster. Let's bring somebody else in that we think can win with them. That guy ended up being Craig Berube. He earned the job long term, and so they stuck with him for the foreseeable future. And then this past offseason, they do it again because Berube had run its course, and we all agreed with that. Berube agrees with that. And so they said, okay, we're going to give Bannister this opportunity as the interim. He earned the job because there was nobody else available. That's the truth. Montgomery didn't become available, so they hired Bannister.
He was a placeholder.
And then Montgomery became available, so it's like, okay, let's go give this guy a 5-year contract, which is rare in the NHL, a real commitment. This is not a team that just every offseason turning into the Carolina Panthers, where they're changing it again. Let's get a new offensive coordinator for Bryce Young. Maybe that'll fix everything. So I think some of the criticism that I've seen is a little unjust for the Blues. But that is one thing that is out there that I wanted to push back against.
This is why I feel like when you get the right coach with the right message that matches with your team, that's where you go with it. Hitch was 6 years with the Blues. And why? Because he had the right message with the right team that worked. Craig Berube, 6 years. It was 8 years, really, because he was the associate coach, but 6 years with the Blues. And guess what? When they moved on from the players that understood the message from Berube, that's when things had to shift. The two guys in between, where you look at Mike Yeo and you look at Drew Bannister, I mean, it sounds cruel, but they really were placeholders, because the Blues looked at that and said, like, hey, we don't have anybody that matches what we believe. Drew Bannister is our best option that can lead us forward. And Armstrong even said that in that press conference. Like, when I looked at the landscape of coaches that were available, none of them made sense, and I always kept coming back to Drew Bannister.
All right, so I think one of the questions that Blues fans are going to have is, what changes now? You guys are telling me this guy's a good head coach, like, you're telling me that he's going to be able to get the most out of the team. Armstrong clearly believes that that's the case. Otherwise, he doesn't give him a 5-year contract. So what tangibly changes for the Blues right now with Bannister out and Jim Montgomery in? Here's Doug Armstrong when asked that question about possible stylistic changes now that Monty is in place.
I personally think that we have to play more in front of the net. I think we have to get pucks more to the net, but that's me. That's Monty's job, or to find out how to tweak the offense to score goals. But doing a lot of scouting this year, I realized where goals are scored from, and I believe myself that we try and pass the puck into the net, and that's a JR, like to pass the puck into the net. It has to be perfect, and it's a game of not perfect. So I think we have to get more pucks at the net. We have to go into those harder areas, and we have to embrace what the reward from the punishment to go into those areas. So I think directing more pucks at the net and playing in a harder area is going to be important for any team to have success in today's NHL.
So I do find this a little bit interesting, because he's saying, hey, get pucks on net. Let's go. Let's get the shots going. And if you look at what we've seen in the past from Jim Montgomery's teams, that's not necessarily the way that they play. When he's been a head coach, it's basically 4 full seasons as a head coach in the NHL, 2 with Dallas, 2 with Boston. They were 20th, 27th, 10th in 2022, and 23rd in shots for per game. So most of the time when he's been a head coach, bottom 10 in the NHL in shots overall on goal. What he does, though, is he puts an emphasis on the high danger chances, Alex. top 10 in high danger, top 12 in high danger chances in all 4 full seasons in the NHL. Now, some of this is certainly a personnel thing, right? He's had good players with Dallas. He had good players with Boston. You would expect your team to get those opportunities when you've got good players on the ice. But it's also a stylistic thing and how you want to attack offensively. That is a clear quality over quantity approach, which is similar to what we saw under Craig Berube. It is similar to what we saw under Ken Hitchcock. That is the style that I would anticipate them going to under Jim Montgomery. I don't think this is going to become some like free-flowing, crazy rush attack all of a sudden. But I did find it interesting as I was diving into some of the numbers yesterday, like the specifics in terms of how they go about attacking. I don't think you're suddenly going to become the Carolina Hurricanes.
No, you're not. I mean, when you look at how Jim Montgomery had success in Boston, it was quality scoring chances. Like, I'm looking at the 2 years that he was with the Boston Bruins, their shooting percentage was 4th best in the National Hockey League. And that's a team that doesn't take a whole lot of shots. Why? Because typically when they're taking their shots, it's in an ideal situation where you know that you can score. I think what Jim Montgomery instilled when he was a part of the coaching staff for those 2 years with Craig Berube, he was one that brought in a lot more of the speed element into their game because Berube had the message of, look, it's forecheck, it's heavy, it's winning puck battles, it's puck support. Jim Montgomery emphasized that with speed through the neutral zone. And that's one thing that Doug Armstrong has talked a lot about with this roster. A lot of the players talk about is, look, we've got a fast team. But there's a difference between being foot speed and mind speed. And that's where I feel like Jim Montgomery brings in that expertise. He can instill that mindset of, like, when you get into the offensive zone, what are you doing with the puck? Are you emphasizing shots from the outside with bodies in front? Are you emphasizing that 1-2 pass so you can at least create a little chaos in front of the net? It's going to come down to, are the players in the right mindset in terms of commitment to what Jim Montgomery wants to do? Because really, that's what this has come down to. You're not going to see 40-plus shots a game with Jim Montgomery's team. I don't even know if this team generates that same way. But what you are going to see is you're going to see more high-danger scoring chances. You're going to see more quality scoring chances. And I do believe there's going to be a lot more of an emphasis on when there's bodies in front of the net. Because when you look at this team, the Foxes, the Toropchenkos, the Jake Neighbors, the Sundqvist, they've got a lot of big bodies that go to the front.
On that point, I did find it interesting that today during morning skate, one of the first changes that we see under Jim Montgomery is, hey, Jake Neighbors back to the top line.
Yep.
Booch, Thomas, and Neighbors is now your top line once again. I like it. They've got a guy in Neighbors who's going to be at the front of the net, and Thomas and Kyrou can play more on the perimeter. Boom, Neighbors, you go to the front of the net. We need you there.
And Thomas and Buchnevich are able to generate space to get pucks on net.
Saad and Shin are with Jordan Kyrou now. Hey, Jordan Kyrou, you're going to be on the perimeter. We understand that. We got Saad and Shin. Those guys can be interchangeable closer to the net. As Kyrou's putting pucks on net, these guys are going to put the rebounds in. That's how people are scoring goals in the NHL right now. Bolduc, Sonny, and Holloway. Really nice third line for you. They wanted to be strong down the middle, which is what you're seeing, Thomas, Shin, Sonny, and Foxa. And they want to be able to have at least one person on every single line that can go to the net. This sounds very Craig Berube-esque. That was always his philosophy with his line combinations, is I need a puck retriever, I need a shooter, and I need a guy that's going to be at the front of the net. And that's basically what you have right now. Now, personnel-wise, I don't think they're at the top end of those specific areas, but they've got guys now that can do that on each respective line. They did not have that previously with Booch, Thomas, and Kyrou all playing together on the top line.
Look at the 2 lines that Jim Montgomery emphasized when he was in Boston the year that they won, 64 games? It was Krejci, Zacha, Pasternak. Shooter, centerman, net front presence in David Krejci. Jake DeBrusk, your shooter. Brad Marchand, net front presence, centerman, Patrice Bergeron. That's what they're going for right now. Now, they lack some of the depth down the middle because I think in an ideal world, Shen is either on the wing or he's playing the third-line center position, but that's the cards that you've got right now. And if you're Jim Montgomery, we're going to emphasize the same thing. Shooter gets the puck on net, centerman gets the zone time, net front presence creates chaos.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, is it anything that Joseph was an extra today or just a maintenance day? Sounds like it was something. My guess is he's not going to be in the lineup today. It really, if you want to be strong down the middle, you have to make a decision of, what do you do with Zach Bolduc? Do we put him into the lineup and have him in over Matthew Joseph in the top 9? Or do we have them be the extra consistently? I think what you're going to see right now, while they're trying to maintain these centers that they're clearly building around for the foreseeable future, I think you're going to see like a little bit of a split there.
Yeah.
Joseph in, You'll have Bolduc out on those days. Bolduc in, Joseph out on those days. Maybe Joseph sometimes gets some fourth line opportunities. You take Walker out of there occasionally. Like I think kind of like with baseball for the Cardinals where they have that like second base left field DH spot that is interchangeable. You've got 3 spots for like 4 or 5 players. I think that's what you're seeing with the Blues lineup right now, where you've got basically 2 spots on that bottom 6 for 3 different players that could get in on any given night.
Yeah, and part of me does wonder, too, that Jim Montgomery, you get in here and it's like, look, you don't want to just start throwing things out of whack right away. Let's put it to what it's been. Bolduc was out. Let's get him back in so we can see it. And then from this, that's where Jim Montgomery evaluates, like, okay, what makes sense? Because Jim Montgomery might be able to see this and say, hey, I don't think Zach Bolduc's ready to be a top 6 forward. Might need to send him down. And now we've got Matthew Joseph that can play here.
He's Alex and T-Bone on BK. Blues back in action tonight against the New York Rangers. Should be a fun game. I love watching the Blues against the Rangers, especially at Madison Square Garden. Chris Kreider in the lineup. We'll talk about him later on this afternoon. Pre-game with Alex at 5. Puck drop for that one coming up tonight on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN at 6 o'clock. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube chat up and running at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. Let's play a game of in or out here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, in or out? Missouri, had they won the game at South Carolina, would still be in contention for a spot in the college football playoff.
In contention? Yeah, probably, because I feel like the SEC teams are still alive when it comes to talking about like 6 or 7 of them.
They would be 9-2 right now.
Yeah, I'll say in. If they win that, they're at least in the conversation still, because somebody would be like, hey, don't forget about Mizzou.
I'm out.
In that high-pitched voice, too.
I'm out on this. I've seen it a lot. I understand the sentiment. Not sure who you're putting them in over. They're not getting in over Indiana. They're not getting in over the ACC team, potentially Teamsa. They're not getting in over the team that wins the Big 12. Notre Dame at this point is in. You're not getting in over Georgia or Tennessee if they continue to win. Alabama would have a better resume than you, unfortunately, because they beat you head-to-head. I don't think Missouri would be in.
See, I think they would be in.
How are you getting them in?
I think they would still put them ahead of Bama because Bama's got 3 losses.
But Bama, as of today, is not in either. They might get in eventually, but as of today, they probably wouldn't.
Sure, now, no. But what I'm saying is, like, if you took out that loss, I mean, look at last week, they had Bama in, they had Ole Miss in with 2 losses. They wouldn't stick around with 3 losses. I think Missouri would leapfrog them, even though they have a head-to-head loss to Alabama. Alabama's got 3 losses, man. Sorry. Yeah. And still 2 of them are...
They have a top 10 win and 4 top 25 wins.
Yeah, I just think that they're going to look at those 3 losses now and say, okay, this team just lost to Oklahoma, who's not very good, and they lost to Vandy, who's an okay SEC team. Meanwhile, when you look at Mizzou, sure, they would have a loss against Alabama and a loss against A&M. I just still think they would look at them and say, you know what, they don't have that 3rd loss, and their 2 losses aren't as bad compared to when you look at A&M losing to Auburn and Alabama losing to Oklahoma.
What's Missouri's best win?
Probably Vandy.
Who
Alabama lost to, by the way.
In this area, it's South Carolina.
For sure. I guess it would be South Carolina in that scenario.
The problem is they would only have 1 win against a top 25 team. I don't think their quality of victory is good enough to be able to bump up above Alabama, because Alabama has that win against Georgia, and I think that's basically what's carrying them right now. If not for that win, they're way below. If not for the win against Georgia, Bama would be down by Illinois, honestly, like in the bottom of the 20s, but instead they're in the top 15 still. So it's an interesting conversation to have because it was just last week and it happened in such excruciating fashion. I think the game that ultimately is going, regardless of if they've won that game against South Carolina or not, the game that will keep them out is A&M. Because Alabama's super explainable. Your quarterback goes down, you end up getting blown out because of that. It was a really close game when Brady Cook left. I can't explain the Texas A&M game, man. I don't understand it. It does not make sense to me. It didn't then. It certainly doesn't today. And as the season has progressed, Missouri's a good team. And they just forgot to play football one day. But other than that, the season's been pretty explainable. All of the rest of it makes sense to me. That was the one. All right, Alex, what do you got?
Guys, in or out, Jim Montgomery will get the Blues to the top half of the league in both power play and penalty kill.
Out.
They're 4...
I've said it all along. I don't think they have the personnel to be top half of the league in power play. Unless they make a significant move.
I actually think their power play has been looking pretty good. Their problem right now is they're not drawing enough power play opportunities. They're only 4% away from being 15th in the NHL. And the penalty kill with Jim Montgomery will get there. I mean, that was his expertise in Boston for those 2 years. The power play is the one that's interesting to me because, man, they've looked good. It's just they're only getting 1 opportunity a game with Robert Thomas back.
Yeah, I'm out as well. I agree with BK. I think it's personnel. I don't think that was a coach-driven issue. I don't think that was an issue under Berube when it was bad. I don't think it was an issue under Bannister when it's been bad. And I still think it's going to be bad. And that's why, like, if I'm saying it's a personnel issue and the Blues can't score when they have a man advantage, it's why I'm skeptical that Jim Montgomery can fix their offense, because I still think that's a personnel issue.
Maybe he can fix the 2-man advantage, because that's plagued this team for about 5 years.
T-Bone, what do you got?
Guys, in or out? Ollie Marmol was a lame duck manager, just like Drew Bannister was as he was hired.
Out.
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I'll go first. I think Ollie Marmol's a good coach or a good manager, and I think that we will find out sooner or later, eventually, that Chaim Bloom values the way that Ollie Marmol manages. So I'm out.
I'm in because I think Chaim Bloom is going to want to get a fresh manager in there that he deems responsible to take over the team. And I don't think that has anything to do with Ali. I agree with you in the sentiment. I think he's a very good manager. I just think he's a lame duck to where there's not much else you can do when Chaim Bloom takes over the helm of this team.
One thing that's worth noting, Chaim Bloom has exclusively worked with like big-time managers. Like when he was in Tampa Bay, it was
So he wants a puppet?
Joe Madden. No, the opposite.
Oh.
Joe Madden, Kevin Cash, and then in Boston, he had Alex Cora, who's one of the most powerful managers in Major League Baseball. That did not end well.
He didn't really agree with him.
No doubt.
Not
but
power on Mookie, but
I guess it could go either direction. Maybe because of that, he wants a manager that's more willing to work hand in hand. But in his past, he has worked with big name, big personality managers, and Ollie doesn't fit into that criteria. I think he eventually could if he continues to have, if he has some success, but he does not right now.
I will say out on this because based on our conversations we've had with Ollie Marmol down at the ballpark, I think Ollie and Chaim Bloom are going to see eye to eye on how to build a modern baseball team. And I don't know if he has necessarily 100% been in on some of the ways that Mo has wanted to build the roster, but he's been willing to adjust and worked well with him. So I think he'll work really well with Chaim Bloom.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, in or out, the Eagles will beat the Lions in the NFC Championship game and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
out. I think the Lions are able to handle the Eagles in a playoff game. I just, their defense overall has been the most impressive aspect of their team this season because I didn't think it was going to be any different than what it was last year. I think they find a way to stop Saquon Barkley, and if you stop Saquon Barkley, I'm not sure how much more open the Philadelphia Eagles offense is.
Man, they're good.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because the Rams defense
Yeah, they
stinks.
spanked
and
the Rams.
Their pass rush, or the pass blocking for the Rams sucks. I do think that Brandon Graham injury is a huge deal for them. So I am going to say out. I still think the Lions will beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, but I'm growing more and more confident in the Philadelphia Eagles, even though Nick Sirianni had some weird clock management at the end of that first half.
Every week, dude.
What was that?
Dude, that first the way that first half ended was to me where it was, I see why people think Sirianni's going to screw this up.
Did he forget that if you turn the ball over that they put seconds on the clock for another team with position?
You're not burning your second timeout, so like instead of getting the ball with 30 seconds to go to try and drive down the field, you end up with probably like a minute.
And those mistakes are what burns you in the playoffs.
For sure. And I think it's the Lions that can do it because beyond that, I'm not sure there's another NFC team that can step toe-to-toe with them and match them talent for talent.
Yeah.
Like I think what we've seen over the past month or so is Philly's just unbelievably talented, man. That being said, they have had some close games. They had a close game against Jacksonville. They had a close game against Cleveland. Like they lost against Tampa, but I think they're finding their footing. And Saquon is so good, dude. That guy is for all of us as football fans, I'm so glad he got out of New York. I'm so glad because we wouldn't have been able to see this with him in New York. He would have been hampered by a bad quarterback, bad offensive line, bad supporting cast. They don't score enough. Him being in Philadelphia has allowed us to see his full potential. It's been really fun to watch, but I would still pick the Lions, so I'm out on this. All right, in or out? Illinois gets their 9th win on Saturday, and they end up playing against Alabama in the Citrus Bowl.
I will say in. I think they will beat Northwestern on Saturday. They should win that game comfortably.
Northwestern's terrible.
Yeah, their wins. I was looking at their schedule today. Their wins are just against the bad teams.
They're horrible.
So I will say in. Whether they play Alabama Citrus Bowl, I could care less. But dude, I'm in on them getting to 9 wins.
Why don't you care about this?
Those bowl games are stupid. Let's just be honest.
Really
Citrus Bowl's a good bowl, man. Hey, if it's Illinois, Alabama, I know most of the stars won't be playing. I'll still watch it. That'll be a fun matchup.
I'm not watching it because I know like Milroe's not playing in it because he'll want to go to the quarterback. You wouldn't watch that
at all?
No, I won't watch the bowl game. I didn't watch their bowl. That team
what
that made
kind of fan are you?
The team that made it to the, I don't remember, the Reliquist Bowl or whatever it is. Whatever. That's how much I care about the stupid bowls.
Man,
like,
you really hate the bowls.
Yeah, they're pointless. It's just a scrimmage game. Who cares?
Fun.
No, it's not.
Okay.
They won, 8 or 7 games, and they got to that bowl, and they played Mississippi State. Didn't care. Didn't watch it.
That's a little different than playing against Alabama.
And their best players transfer, or didn't, Witherspoon sat out, Chase Brown sat out.
This team shouldn't have those kinds of issues, though. Pat Bryant's going
to sit out. I think some of their secondary, I can't remember if they're eligible to go to the draft or not. They could sit out. Alabama's going to have guys that sit out. Like, I don't want to watch the second strings play football. I'd go to the spring game if I gave a damn about that.
Okay.
Well, this is a little
That's
different than that,
ridiculous.
but whatever.
Yeah. Nobody's celebrating the
I'm
spring
in. I think
game.
that's exactly what's going to happen. Illinois appears to be headed toward playing in the Citrus Bowl. And hey, man, if you're an Illinois fan, other than T-Bone, I think that's a really cool bowl game. First of all, if you're an Illinois fan that wants to travel for the game right around Christmas, it's in Orlando, so there's a bunch of stuff for you to do in the area. And playing a bowl against Alabama is really good exposure for your program. Like that's the stuff that actually potentially matters. And if you lose, you do what T-Bone just said, where you're like, well, we had our starters out. We were ready for the transfer portal, whatever. There's only upside in playing against Alabama in a bowl game. If you win, you can say you beat Alabama in the freaking bowl game, which is awesome. T-Bone won't care, but I will. Alex will. You as an Illinois fan should. There's no downside, ultimate upside. I think that's the best case scenario.
Illinois fans, we are better than that. We won't celebrate like winning the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State's fourth string quarterback.
Then you're a bad program that doesn't know how to sell yourself.
Oh, yeah,
And
right.
you aren't that.
Hey, that felt a little Tony. That felt a little
Mizzou-
For a
Tony.
guy that didn't really celebrate the Cotton Bowl.
A little
last year.
Kadarius, man.
Yeah, well, they did. They sold it.
Yeah. I said you.
We need to start having buzzwords in the studio. Every time I yell Kadarius, somebody needs to check their tone.
I do hope, for what it's worth, that Missouri ends up in the Vegas Bowl. I think that's best case scenario for them.
That's just being selfish because you want to go to Vegas.
I won't be going, but I do think for Mizzou fans, that would
Who
be
you want
nice.
them to play in the Vegas Bowl?
Who doesn't matter,
USC.
man.
I think USC would be a fun matchup.
Yeah, they'd kill you to see that team.
USC's not bad, man.
Whew, stinky bowl game right there.
Okay. I think that would be a lot of fun. USC fans would travel. It's in Vegas. I think that's probably best case scenario.
Just wish Mizzou wasn't scared of Illinois.
I think USC's winning this weekend against Notre Dame. Yeah, they're at home. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk about that as we get further into the year. All right. With so many SEC contenders losing, it begs the question, is this about the conference's depth? Or is this a sign that the top of the conference isn't as good as it's been in years past, and it's time to admit as much? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londa Chevrolet and Johnny Londa of Autoplex. Over the weekend, the St. Louis Blues made a coaching change as they fired head coach Drew Bannister and hired Jim Montgomery, and he'll make his coaching debut with the St. Louis Blues tonight as they take on the New York Rangers in New York. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. This portion update is driven by Johnny Londa Chevrolet and Johnny Londa of Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So SEC contenders are going down left and right. We saw it all weekend long, including a game that you'll hear in our Pick'em reveal later on this afternoon, where Texas A&M lost against Auburn. They weren't alone in that regard, Alex. You also had Alabama losing on the road. Not just losing, looking miserable on the road against Oklahoma. Ole Miss dropped a game on the road against Florida. Now, Georgia won, but they were in a game midway through the third quarter against UMass, and they were playing at home. That one was a weird one to be able to watch. This is strange, and it's something that seems to happen every week with this conference, and we write it off and we say, oh, wow, look at how good the SEC is. All of these teams are amazing, and that may be true. I think the depth of the SEC is significantly better. Not a little bit. Significantly better than any other conference in the land. But at some point, I also have to ask the question, is some of this about the top of the SEC not being as good as the top of the Big Ten, for example? Because I don't see Penn State or Ohio State or Oregon losing against these middling teams. And in fact, most of their games against the middling teams are blowouts in their favor. So it does stand to reason that if I put Ohio State or Oregon or Penn State in the SEC, would they be doing what Alabama's doing, where they're losing? Would they be doing what LSU or Ole Miss or South Carolina or Texas A&M are doing? I don't think so. I think they're just better than these teams. So how do you view this, Alex, when you see that you look at the SEC and half of the damn conference is ranked right now in the top 25, and those that are on the outside looking in are like others receiving votes? How are you evaluating what we've seen with this conference and the topsy-turvy nature of it?
I think it's just the power of the SEC. I mean, like, if you ever question what you just asked, BK, go and watch the Ohio State versus Indiana game, because that was built like it was going to be two juggernauts because you had an undefeated team in Ohio State. And I mean, Indiana crumbled in that game against Ohio State. I think you've got the top teams in the Big Ten when you're talking about Oregon, when you're talking about Indiana, or when you're talking about Ohio State, Penn State, and then I think you've got everybody else. Like, it's a tier difference between the two. And when you're in the SEC, sure, you've got the Georgias and the Texas that are just at the top and they look so dominant, but the SEC just always feels so tighter to where when they play against each other, you do see some of these losses, and they're labeled as bad losses because they're not ranked opponents. But if you put that team up against one of the lower level teams in the Big Ten, I think that bad loss for one of the top teams in the SEC, they're probably pulling out a victory in the matchup against a Big Ten team.
I think that's true, but like if I put, I don't know, Auburn in the Big Ten, right? Just as the example, because this past weekend they beat Texas A&M, who previously was considered to be a favorite to get to the SEC championship game, and still can if they beat Texas this weekend. By the way, Texas has played won exactly 0 games so far this year against teams with a winning record in the SEC. Weird, right? So, pretty easy schedule, all things considered. People talked about Mizzou's schedule. Let's talk a little bit about Texas. There should be a conversation to be had. We'll put that off to the side. We'll do that later this week.
That was Kadarius.
Oh, sorry.
Oregon, when they played against Illinois, beat the ever-living hell out of them.
Yeah,
Illinois is a solid team. Illinois is like playing against Missouri or playing against South Carolina, and they just wiped the floor with them. Other teams on their schedule from the Big Ten so far this year, UCLA won that game on the road 34-13. Purdue on the road 35-0. Michigan on the road 38-17. Now, they did have a close call last week against Wisconsin, but that's the first one really that they've had all year long.
And Michigan's like Florida in the SEC.
So, I think the Big Ten's just better, man. I should clarify. the top of the Big Ten is better than the top of the SEC. There have been times in the past where the roles were reversed, and I thought the Big Ten maybe had better depth than the SEC, but the SEC, the top of it, with Georgia, Bama, et cetera, at the top, they've been the more dominant conference. I don't view it that way, man. I'm not sure there's any team in the SEC that I think is better than Ohio State or Oregon. I think my answer is actually I don't believe there's any team in the SEC that's better than either of those teams. And, man, I don't know about them compared to, like, Penn State either. I don't know, man. I think it's close. Like, Penn State, Texas, neutral field, I'd have it as, like, a pick 'em. And Penn State is the clear third best team in the Big Ten right now. And I think Texas is apparently the clear-cut best team in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Texas is the only team that would kind of hold up with those top dogs in the Big Ten. And then I think it's a significant drop-off. Like, I don't know how you feel, but when you talk about, like, that second tier of the Big Ten, I mean, we just talked about it. You have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. That's the big three. Mm-hmm. That second tier is Indiana, Illinois, and then maybe, like, Iowa potentially. And I think it's just probably those two teams in that second tier. I think they could hold their own against these two-loss teams in the SEC.
Oh, see, that's where I disagree.
See, I think
you
this
think
weekend
Illinois would have hold their own against the SEC?
Yeah. I think this weekend showed you.
I don't agree with that at all.
I think this weekend showed you.
That's where I think the gap is. I think there's like 6 teams in the SEC, maybe 8 teams in the SEC that I would take above those 2 teams that you just mentioned.
I think this weekend showed you. Or maybe the 3-loss teams. The 3-loss teams may be more on that side than the 2-loss teams, like Alabama. I think Illinois could hang with Alabama. I think when you look at the 3-loss teams that are also in there, I think South Carolina, A&M, I think they could hang with them. I'm not saying they win, but I think they can hang with them just like Illinois.
If you go on the road against
State.
those teams, I think you lose against every single one of them.
Well, we pointed to a neutral site field. I think they can play with them.
Where the SEC is having these issues is these teams going on the road.
I think the SEC showed you this weekend that all these 3-loss teams that kind of fell, Alabama, you had Ole Miss that fell as well. I just don't think this is a great conference. I do think it is deep, but I don't think it's great. Like, I think you got those 1-loss teams in the ACC that were sitting on the outside looking in, right? You had SMU, Miami, Florida that were kind of being viewed as, oh, they're not as good as those 2 3-loss teams in the SEC. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think this weekend, because those losses to Auburn is not a good team. They are in that last tier in the SEC. I think Oklahoma falls into that last tier in the SEC. I don't care that those games are on the road. They need to take care of business to Alabama and Texas A&M, and they didn't do that. And I think that was a reminder of, hey, this conference is not as deep as we think it is, and there is not as good of a team in the top tier. I think it's Texas, and then there are just a couple of 2-loss teams involved.
Your team lost to Minnesota at home.
Hey.
And I'm supposed to sit over here and not say anything?
Minnesota's better than Oklahoma and who's the other one? We just said Auburn. Minnesota will beat them.
I don't agree.
I think they will.
Minnesota's 6-5, man. They lost to North Carolina, Iowa,
Auburn's
Michigan,
not gonna make a bowl
Rutgers. Game. Because they're in the SEC. This is where, like, I'm gonna divide the two of us. I thought we were on the same page, and I'm realizing we're very much not. The SEC, like, I think there's a donut hole right now in the Big Ten, where I think the top 3 in the conference are better than basically anybody that the SEC has to offer this year, potentially. And then I think I would put a few of the SEC teams right after that top 3. Like, I think Texas, Georgia especially, those 2 teams I'll put in above Indiana. And then I would put Indiana in there of, like, the next tier in the Big Ten. I think Indiana's going to get a lot of unjust criticism this week. Yeah, they got beat up against Ohio State. It happens. They got destroyed. I think Indiana's still a really good football team, man, and they took care of business against basically everybody else that's been on their schedule, and they should be in the college football playoff, especially after the bloodbath in the SEC from this past weekend. But then after Indiana, like, I look over at the SEC and I'm like, okay, beyond that, Tennessee, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Alabama, LSU, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Florida. I think all of those teams would go in before I get to Illinois, if we're just doing like a power rankings of the Big Ten and the SEC combined. And then I would put in my 5th Big Ten team behind those 10 SEC teams that I just mentioned. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying.
I think that's where I was
there's an
following.
argument for a couple of them to be slotted in there. But, like, when we get down to, like, Florida, Ole Miss, I don't know, man. I mean, they've got Florida especially, I really wouldn't hear the argument on. Like, I think Illinois is a better football team than Florida.
But based on what? Like, Florida's been really good this year when they've had their starting quarterback. The spots where we've seen Florida struggle is, they had just a brutal schedule this season. We said it before the season. You looked at that thing, you're like, man, you've got really difficult non-con slate, and you go up against basically every top 25 opponent that could be had in the SEC. And when they've had Lagway out there, they have been awesome. They didn't have him for a couple of weeks, and that's when you saw the really tough losses against Georgia and Texas, for example.
Yeah, I don't know. I just am not in on Florida. I mean, again, they're another 6-5 team that will. To me, that's tough to sell me on when you're looking at an Illinois team that's 9-3, and you can say, who's their big win against, but they're taking care of business, And now the Minnesota loss is hard to defend for Illinois, but that one it is hard to defend. But I don't know. I don't view Florida as a team that's in that conversation. I just don't when I look at the SEC. I think they're now down to 3 playoff teams, and maybe they get a 4th win after the conference championship games. But I think that's it now. I think their hope of a 5th has well gone out the window.
I agree there.
And I think that
Totally
4th
agree.
team is up for debate as well.
Well, yeah, because
To
you
get
got
a 4th team in?
Yeah.
your
they're
3
getting
lost
4.
teams. You'll get 4, but you get 3 lost teams that are all fighting for the 4th place spot.
I think it's going to be a tough sell to put in a 3-loss team in over potentially a 2-loss SMU who have lost the conference championship game to Miami. Clemson's that one team that's going to be fighting to be in that conversation as well, and they can beat us. They can beat South Carolina today or this
The Big
weekend.
12 might not get anybody in. That's another thing that
they have to get one, right?
They don't. If the group of 5 teams ranked ahead of them, there is no automatic qualifying from the Big 12.
And that's where it's
the
going to
4 highest ranked conference champions end up getting in. And if Boise State ends up ranked ahead of any of the Big 12 teams, which right now appears to be likely, you could potentially see a scenario where the Big 12 does not get a team into the college football playoff.
And that's where if you're looking at the Big 12 versus an Alabama, even with 3 losses, they still have a top 10 win and 4 top 25 wins versus the Big 12. To what's the narrative of why they get in over an Alabama team with 3 losses?
The 5 best conference champions get in. So that,
For sure?
Yeah. So that means there is a Big 12
they
team
wouldn't get a
contending
bye.
it.
in that
Exactly.
scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boise State will probably end up with a bye.
That's my bad.
Wild. But if
They're
that's the
likely to
case,
at this point.
like if Clemson beats South Carolina, and we're talking about South Carolina being this team that kind of falls in this middle portion of that pack, right? Well, now Clemson's got that big top 25 win. They've only got 2 losses on their resume, and one of them is to Georgia, who's in the playoff. I think there's an argument for Clemson to get into the playoff. Now, where it'll get interesting is how you look at these conference championships again, right? Because SMU, Miami play each other.
Texas A&M is a huge game next week. That's got a big part of this because if Texas A&M wins that game, that's your easiest path to be able to get the 4
And if
in.
Texas wins that game, now it feels a lot more complicated for
sure.
the SEC to find that 4th team.
He's T-Bone, that's Alex, I'm BK. We'll talk more college football throughout the week this week. Coming up next time for the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's dive into the junk drawer. Guys, I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, but rushing the field once again became a big, massive subject nationwide. Arizona State had a situation where the fans rushed the field with time remaining on the clock. Their coach was very upset about the whole thing. Oklahoma ended up rushing the field after their win against Alabama.
Theirs was wild.
Auburn rushed the field after their win in 4 overtimes against Texas A&M. Arizona State, let's put in a separate category. That was a weird situation, and there's a lot of stuff that happened there.
That's the one with the field goal poles taken down, right? Where there was a second left on the clock.
Happened. Yeah, happened in Oklahoma as well.
Yeah, so let's set aside the Arizona State one, because that's a program that suddenly finds itself in the college football playoff race that nobody saw coming going into the season.
T-Bone hated this 12-team playoff format.
I mean, let's be honest. A 3-team team shouldn't be in the playoff. But whatever. The SEC's going to get one of them, as Brandon eloquently put in the last segment.
Man, he used Brandon there.
That's when you know.
Hot damn.
With my wife, it's always Brandon Michael. If I'm in trouble, it's Brandon Michael.
Well, if I'm really angry, I am going to throw out your middle name.
If I'm angry, I'm just going to drop the F-bomb.
Brandon Michael.
Should Oklahoma and Auburn be rushing the field after those wins?
Oh, absolutely.
Oklahoma?
Why wouldn't you?
I mean, Oklahoma's one of the most historic programs in the country. They're 6-5. They just beat Alabama. I get it's Alabama, but it's not Alabama.
Would Mizzou fans rush the field?
I mean, they'd rush it with a top 25 win.
Maybe.
They would have rushed the Boston College win, right?
Also, and I say this as no disrespect to my
Probably.
school, Mizzou's not Oklahoma. Like, does Kansas rush the court in basketball when they beat UConn? No.
Well, they'd be a higher-ranked opponent, though.
Yeah, but let's say in this scenario, like, it's a down year for Kansas.
I would hope Illinois would rush the court if they beat UConn. They kicked our ass in the tournament.
If you're one of the best, most historic programs in the country, I feel like the bar to rush the field has to be incredibly high.
If I beat a higher-ranked opponent,
that's generally speaking in favor of rushing the field. That one felt odd to me.
if I beat a higher-ranked opponent, I'm rushing the field as a fan. Because it's a home game, like that's freaking awesome to be able to be there and see that happen, regardless if you're trash in the season or you don't live up to the expectations. I still took down a top-ranked opponent.
Yeah, but you're Oklahoma.
See,
dude.
the one that I disagree with was Arizona State rushing the field. Act like you belong in the top 25.
But they don't.
Well, that's why I would have rushed if I was Arizona State.
See?
The difference is they have no history, man. They don't win games like that, like ever. And so for them to be able to do it, it made all the sense in the world to me. Mizzou, when they won the SEC East after beating Texas A&M back in 2013, rushed the field. Why? Because they didn't think they belonged in that scenario. Like that's not a historic program. It's very different at Mizzou or Arizona State. These teams that are like solid, on the rise, have a little bit of history, but like, wow, this is something that we're not used to here. Or Mizzou in 2010 beats Oklahoma, #1 in the country, game day there that day. That feels different to me. Oklahoma doing this? I don't know, man.
See, they're T-Bone 3 on the 3 rules.
No, these never
as to
work.
If we should or should not rush the field. If you are playing a top 25 team and you are in the top 25,
that's it.
and you win, you should not rush the field unless it's #1. #1 I'm okay with because they're the best team in the country.
Yeah, if you're the best team in the country, you don't rush.
But when you're 21 going against 14 and you beat them, we do not rush the field in that scenario. #2 for me. You are a top 25 team. You were not favored in the game at home against an unranked opponent. You beat them. You should not rush the field. Agree?
Sure.
I've seen that happen before. And that might have been the only 2 rules that we needed.
So T-Bone 3 that only had 2.
Yeah, I feel like there was one more. I don't remember what it
games
was.
last year.
Oh, the 3rd rule. You can rush the field if you are an unranked team and beat a top 25 team. And that's why I'm okay with Oklahoma doing it. That's why I'm okay with Auburn doing it.
Every week, then. Like, this is just it's ridiculous. It's absolutely
And, like, let's say,
you know what? Let
Oklahoma,
me be more firm in this.
Oklahoma, to your point,
How are
as
you
like
gonna be
a
more firm than
traditional
this?
program or whatnot,
I'm
they
like
were
kind
in
of
the Big
teetering.
12.
I'm teetering on like, oh, should they have done it? I don't know.
Stop telling fans what to do.
This is embarrassing if you're Oklahoma.
Well, it's
This is a
embarrassing when you
team-
rush with 30 seconds to go.
Well, that's
and the
embarrassing.
game's not
Understand
over.
how the game goes.
Let me read you
Yeah.
the number of games that Oklahoma has won by year since 2006, okay? 11-11, 12-8. Oh, down year in 2009. 12-10, 10-10, 11-8. 2014. 11-11, 12-12, 12-9 in a 2020 COVID season where they only played 11 games total. 11-6, 10. You don't rush the field when you're Oklahoma.
Well, hold on. To be fair,
when that's your
if we're going
20-year
all
span.
the way back to
It's embarrassing,
2006. If we're going back to 2006, some of those freshmen were born that year, probably.
No, we're not, though. Like, the last 5 years, 10, 11, 9, and 2.
Yeah, in the Big 12. Look, it's a new standard in the SEC.
This is ridiculous. It's an embarrassment that they rushed the field after having one good win in the SEC.
They're rushing the field because they realize that there are no more 10, 11 win seasons. We suck, and we need to enjoy this while we have it.
Now, look, where I'll agree with you on it, hey, let's not storm the field, is when the game's still going, okay? Now, that was stupid.
When there's time on the clock, just don't be that dumb.
That made me question the Oklahoma education, but that storming of the field, I had no problem with.
Arizona State's education, because people don't go there for the education, they go there for the partying scene.
Says who?
Oklahoma's a little different. Says everybody. I wanted to go to Arizona State as a high school junior because all I had heard about is #1 party school in America.
BK, partier. That's how I always recognized it.
Hey, man. Alton. Coming up next.
Alton passed out in a weird spot on the bed.
What a weird swing from Arizona State to
barely
Alton.
made it through like 4 or 5 drinks. It was gone. Alton. Meanwhile, Alex is downing a 12-pack of Bud Light. Alton.
Somehow I came out the best shape of everyone that day.
Coming up next. Has another team been added to the Nolan Arenado possibility list? Sure sounds that way. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alex, another team has added itself to the mix for Nolan Arenado with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. This is from a piece over in the Boston Globe. According to Alex Spire of the Boston Globe, the St. Louis Cardinals could have a potential match for Nolan Arenado with the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox have considered moving Rafael Devers from his natural position at third base over to first base. We saw something similar with the San Diego Padres last year, where they kind of moved around their infield and ended up opening up spots accordingly. This sounds like it's very much in the early stages of even talking to Devers, considering his agent said, quote, Rafael Devers is a third baseman, and he will continue to play third base and work hard to get better at it, end quote.
Ooh.
That's not asked about the possibility of moving off of third base. Not exactly what you want if you're the Red Sox and this is your best player and you're thinking about how you're going to make this work.
I'm getting the sense this report wasn't supposed to leak.
Oh, no, not again.
That being said, again, going back to what we saw last year, something similar happened with the San Diego Padres when they decided to move another former infielder from the Boston Red Sox over to second base. He wasn't particularly thrilled about it, and then the Padres ended up being arguably the best team in Major League Baseball this season. Alex, now that we have the Red Sox involved with this, we've talked about the Astros as a potential option. We've talked about the Yankees as a potential option, the Dodgers as a potential option. Do you think the Cardinals are going to be able to trade Nolan Arenado this offseason?
I don't. Because I think that all of these teams that are looking for a third baseman and all of these teams that could be interested in Nolan Arenado, that's great. But is Nolan Arenado interested in going over there? Because if he's not one of the guys that requested to be traded, I don't know if Nolan Arenado wants to go anywhere. Unless you're sending him to his desired destination, and that would be the Dodgers. And I also think he wants a shot at a World Series. And I don't know if the Boston Red Sox would be that team, even with some of these moves. So, no, I don't think so. I think there's going to be intrigue. I think there's going to be teams that could be available to trade Nolan Arenado to, but I feel like it's always going to come back to the Blues going to Nolan Arenado, or the Cardinals going to Nolan Arenado and saying, hey, we got a spot. Are you willing to go to Boston? And if I'm Arenado, no, I don't want to take my family to go to Boston because we don't want to go there. So, no, I think it'd be really great for this team to have more suitors, but I don't think it's going to fall into place for the Cardinals.
See, I actually think that Boston could make some sense because I think, one, they're clearly trying to be a contender again. Like, everything that has been reported out of Boston this year is, hey, they're in on the Juan Soto sweepstakes. My guess, the Devers' idea of moving him to first is they're going to be in on Bregman. That would be my guess as to what their number one target would be with this kind of a move. So that signals right away, hey, we're trying to contend. And if I'm Nolan Arenado, I can look at that and go, man, that's a historically great franchise. I could see where maybe you look at them and say, hey, I want to change the scenery. I want to go play in the AL East. The one thing that would worry me about that is, okay, no, he's going to be spotlighted in Boston, potentially. You know, it's not like he's going to a lineup where he would hit sixth. He probably would need to hit fourth or fifth in that lineup to help them out. But I could see where it makes sense. And if you're Boston needs to get in the good graces with their fan base again, right? And you can kind of say to your fan base, hey, Arenado, that's the splashy move, right? We just brought in this future Hall of Fame third baseman. We think that we can fix his kind of downward trend. And maybe off the wall, like I just looked this up on Baseball Savant.
I was just curious. About to wonder. I was wondering.
So he hit 15 home runs last year as a Cardinal. That would have been 12 in Boston. Now, what I don't know what that would signal is like, okay, so how many of those off the wall end up adding to doubles for him?
For Nolan Arenado?
Yeah.
Hard hit singles, baby.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going for.
Now, some of the outs, though, because he hits a lot of fly ball outs to left field. Some of those outs maybe go from being outs to singles, and so maybe now you've got a higher average. Maybe he hits 300 next year. I don't know how much value that really adds to him, but hey, I could see that being the thing that you end up adjusting for, but I don't know that the doubles end up coming for him.
Yeah, maybe not. But I can see where Boston kind of convinces themselves, okay, we've lost out on Juan Soto. We've lost out on Alex Bregman. What is another splashy move that we can do? I could see where they could look at themselves and say, okay, maybe Arenado's that guy. We get the Cardinals to eat some of that salary. He's a big name. Red Sox fans will know that name. Now, I'm not saying that's going to play well with Red Sox fans because they are smart and look at him and go, wait a minute, that guy's in decline. But I could see where Boston ends up saying, we've got interest in him. And I could see where Arenado wouldn't mind going to Boston.
I think they're going to find a suitor, man. I really do. The Yankees, Boston, we've talked about both of them at this point. Houston, if Bregman ends up leaving, maybe they become an option for you. Philadelphia seemingly is a name that's kind of been bandied about a little bit. The Dodgers. That's 5 different teams that could emerge as a potential suitor for Nolan Arenado. At a minimum, that's 5 teams that appear to want to improve at third base with a star. There are not 5-star third basemen available this offseason. And Nolan Arenado is one of those. Whatever we think of him offensively, he's still great defensively. And if you're a team, I could see how you convince yourself that in a different situation where he's not the number one option in the lineup, maybe he improves a bit. And at a minimum, high average, little bit of pop, third, fourth best bat in your lineup. I could see how you can convince yourself of that elsewhere working for you, especially when you have fewer limitations with the money side of things. I think they're going to be able to find a suitor. I don't think it's going to be easy. I do think there's a likelihood that the Cardinals are going to have to eat some of that money, and that's going to be where the negotiation gets really difficult. Or another team says, hey, we'll take him on, but you have to include Ryan Helsley in this because every team I just mentioned is a real contender right now, and Helsley fits every team in Major League Baseball if you're trying to contend. That's where it gets a little bit more dicey, but for the Cardinals, I think they're going to be able to find a suitor for Arenado, even if it doesn't come back with a significant return for them.
Yeah, I'm still skeptical that they're going to be able to move on from Arenado, but I'm definitely more of leaning into the camp of where you are since the offseason has started. You know, I thought at the end of the year there was no way on earth they were going to be able to move him. Now as the offseason has slowly but surely started to get underway, I do see some paths to where they are able to move on from him. I still am on the camp of no way on earth would I attach Helsley into that package, but we'll see if the Cardinals would be willing to do that.
Coming up in 15 minutes, a late addition to the show, Ben Bishop is going to join us. Of course, played for Jim Montgomery while he was down in Dallas. Certainly has some ties here to the area. So Ben Bishop is going to join us coming up in about 15 minutes here on BK and Ferrario. Let all your friends know Ben Bishop will join us to talk about Jim Montgomery, what he can add to the Blues from behind the bench on the show at 1:30. But coming up next, we got our football pick'em reveal. A big week for us in the pick'em. One more week left in this month after this past weekend. How do we do? You'll find out next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. It is time for our football pick'em reveal. This is week 3 out of 4 that we're about to reveal for you. This upcoming week, we're going to have a very early pick'em. We're going to do this on Wednesday for the Thanksgiving, Black Friday weekend slate. There's a lot of games available to all of us, so start your prep work. We're going to do that over the next couple of days. But Wednesday, we will pick our games because we're off on Thursday and Friday this week here on BK and Ferrario to spend the holidays with some family. Let's get to our reveal from this past weekend. If you're new to the show, we do this every Friday typically. Pick 3 games against the spread, no props, no over-unders, just against the spread. College football, NFL, just has to be over by the time that we get back on the air on Monday. Let's start with T-Bone, who's currently leading the way with his 1-point play.
1-point play for this week. This team truly stinks offensively. Defensively, though, they've been competitive with a lot of teams. They lost to Georgia by 1 point. They lost at Tennessee by just 10. They beat Ole Miss on the road. So give me Kentucky plus 20.5 points at Texas.
Ewers. Ball came out there, and this is going to be returned for a touchdown. That is Pop, Dumas, Johnson, and finally Kentucky gets a break.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
You covered.
Barely.
I feel like that was a good pick by you.
Yeah, I didn't say they'd win.
I gave consideration to it. Texas kept it close enough to where you didn't have to really sweat it necessarily. Good pick by you.
I saw early on, I think Texas jumped off like fast to a 14-0 start. Immediately I was like, oh, I have some regrets. And then you know what? It settled down.
I had one of those on my picks too, buddy.
All right, so 1-point play worked out for T-Bone. Let's get to his 2-point play over the NFL side of things. Less so.
Guys in Tennessee, well, Nashville's not known for football this year for their NFL team. That team's given up. Give me the Houston Texans, minus 7.5 versus the Tennessee Titans. Texans have had a weird year, I get it, but Tennessee, they clearly have quit on the season. I think this is going to be a blowout like we've seen Tennessee get blown out in the past.
Okonkwo, he's got some inside Texans territory, inside the 35-30, 25-20. He may go, stiff arm, end zone. Touchdown, Titans.
Dude, I've learned. I think I've bet the Texans like 3 times this season, and every time I've been burned by them.
I was a little surprised. We said it at the time. We were a little surprised that you trusted him in that kind of a number.
Yeah,
I don't trust them in anything less than 3 points.
I just, I've seen the Titans get blown out by teams, and I thought Texans, if there was ever a bounce back spot, it was that game, and now I'll never pick them again the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's where I fell.
Yeah, Tennessee is not good, and that is a bad sign for Houston with what we saw yesterday.
Yeah.
Going back to the college football slate, of course, T-Bone ended up being able to hit this one. I liked it at the time. It was a good pick.
And, guys, in the ACC, there's this little team called Virginia who just got blown out last week by Notre Dame 35-14. They got blown out by Clemson and gave up 48 points. They gave up 41 points to North Carolina, who can't throw a football this season. And this weekend, they host SMU, who is still playing for their college football lives and hoping to get to the ACC championship game, and it's only a 10-point spread. I like SMU on the road at Virginia, minus 10 points.
And it is a quarterback draw, and Jennings towards the goal line, in for the touchdown. And SMU seizing control on the road and ever closer to the ACC championship game.
That's what it's supposed to look like when a legit college football playoff contender goes up against a horrific opponent, even if it's on the road. 33-7, never really in doubt. Good pick, T-Bone.
Another great week for your boy, just rolling along this
2-1, 4 points. T-Bone up to 14 points so far in the first 3 weeks, which means basically he's safe.
Yeah.
Not 100%, but more or less. T-Bone's safe. He's good to go. Congratulations, T-Bone. Good 3-week stretch.
Another month I will avoid punishment. How great is that?
You're saving the best for last.
All right, Alex, let's get to yours. On the 1-point side of things, you wanted to go to the college football slate. Let's see if it worked out for you.
I am going to go with the underdog, and I'm taking Indiana plus 13 points. Oh. I don't think Indiana wins. I think they keep it close.
Downs lets it take a bounce, picks it up at the 21, spins out of traffic, up the sideline with room. Here he gallops, cuts it back, Downs, the Alabama transfer, here at Ohio State, touchdown, world famous.
Yes. Ridiculous. I'm done with college. Ferrario is making that statement now. He is done. They scored that first touchdown, and much like T-Bone, I'm like, ooh. And then, my God, by halftime, I turned it off because Indiana couldn't get a freaking first down.
Yeah, Indiana on their first drive looked awesome. They ended up on that first drive, 11 plays, 70 yards, took 6 minutes off the clock. And I was with you, Alex. I was like, okay, people are about to start eating some of their crow because this isn't going to be a game here.
And I still thought Indiana was going to lose, but I'm like, you know what? Give me a 3-goal or 3-point loss, and that's going to be good for Indiana and good for your boy. And
Indiana had 145 yards on their first drive and their last drive combined. So in the first drive and then garbage time. Between them, they had 8 yards.
Yeah.
Total.
Literally.
In every other drive they had in the game, 8 total yards. Ohio State was just suffocating defensively.
Yeah.
I worried about that pick for you because he just didn't know what Indiana was.
I thought it was going to be.
That's why I avoided that game.
I thought it was such an important game for Indiana that they would keep things close. Because even if you lose by 6 points, 7 points.
Nope.
Apparently
Lost
the team,
by 23 points.
Apparently the team was
Let's go over to the NFL side, Alex, see if this one worked out a little better.
I think the 49ers are in a do-or-die situation right now. Now, I know their division is still open, but against the Packers, and I know the Packers are coming off the bye, Jordan Love a little bit healthier, but it's +2 for the 49ers. I know it's in Green Bay. The 49ers have continuously kept games close. Whether they lose or win, I think this one's going to be another tight one. I think the Niners win this one straight up.
Jacobs, no shot. Barreling forward. Touchdown again. Number 3 for Jacobs in Green Bay.
I have no excuse for this other than I shouldn't have made this pick. And I wouldn't have made this pick if we made it typically on Friday.
No, you deserve an excuse for this one. You didn't know Purdy was going to be out. You didn't know
their
Trent
entire
Williams
defense.
was going to be out. That was a tough one, man. Bad luck on that one, unfortunately. It counts. No getting out of it, tough luck for you. All right, on the other side of the NFL things went a little better for Alex on Sunday on this one.
I'm taking the Detroit Lions. You know what they are on the road this season?
Good.
Undefeated. You know what
they've lost.
You know what they've won by on the road average this season? 10 points. I think this is not going to be a good game for Anthony Richardson. It was fun. We beat the Jets. This is great. We're going to be still competitors. No, I think the Detroit Lions are going to be fine in this one. It's a 7.5-point spread.
Goff hands it off. Gibbs cuts to the outside, to the end zone. Touchdown. His second today.
I know they scored 6 points in the game. I actually felt pretty good about Anthony Richardson's performance, all things considered, given the fact that they're going up against the Lions, who now have a top 5 defense in the NFL suddenly. Good hit on you, by you, Alex. It worked out. Lions are awesome. That team is amazing, dude. But I thought the Colts, all things considered, got what they could have asked for out of Anthony Richardson.
Every team is going to have problems with this Lions team because they don't know how to stop the run. When you've got 2 different guys, and I think Montgomery got banged up in that one, so I don't know what the situation is there. But like Jared Goff didn't have a good game. But their offense just continues to roll when you've got Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs.
All right, so 1-2 week for Alex, but he does hit the 3-point play. That's like the money ball in our game. He's up to 8 points on the week, 4-5 overall. Let's get to my 1-point play from Thursday. You guys know how this went. Steelers are a 3.5-point favorite in this one on the road, and I am taking the home team, the Cleveland Browns. They've been bad in Thursday night games under Mike Tomlin, especially on the road. This feels like a classic letdown spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they not only fail to cover the spread, I think they lose outright in this game.
From the gun, hands it off to the end zone goes Chubb. Touchdown Browns.
Man, I almost picked
Did you
this
do that
team
in
too.
the Fastlane Pick'em Challenge? Wow, I heard them on Thursday questioning Brandon's insight on the Browns. I mean, it's fair, but they were all wrong.
Just want you to know that I'm at the top of the leaderboard for this week.
Yeah, you are.
Pick'em Challenge.
It is weird how you're really good at the Pick'em Challenge in the Fastlane, yet somehow here.
The spreads throw me off. It's really unfortunate because that's the way you make money.
You took it in the rear end 1 week, man, and then you never go back.
All right, let's go to the college football slate for a game that I had just regrets. Explain to me how Texas A&M is a 2.5-point favorite against Auburn. Somebody
Buzzword.
please do it.
You'll find out on Saturday.
Doesn't make sense to me. All I need is a 3-point win on the road by Texas A&M against a super mediocre Auburn team, and I cover the spread. Love it. Give me Texas A&M minus 2.5.
Can the Aggies answer? Down 43-41. Direct snap, pitch back, Reed rolls right, dropped! It was dropped! Auburn wins!
How many times do I have to tell you this, man? Every single time. Can somebody explain to me?
We even told him during a commercial break, that's a trap.
Yeah.
We don't know why,
It's
but
a
we
trap.
know it's a trap.
Yeah, and it was. I was totally wrong. When that went to overtime, I was like, we're good. I'm going to win. Texas A&M's going to take care of business here. And then it went to triple overtime, and I looked over at Kara and I said, oh no, they do the 2-point shootout thing. Like I lost. It doesn't matter how it goes from here. It's over. Because it's a 2.5-point line. I can't win. Things went poorly. We don't have to listen to my 3-point play. It was the Buccaneers. They beat the hell out of the New York
Miss Daniel
Giants.
Jones.
Yeah, you guys questioned me for that one. Yeah, no, the Giants were every bit as bad as I thought they were.
In the audio I grabbed, he called it perfect. He's like, Tommy DeVito's going to take a bunch of sacks. They're not going to have a point at halftime, or they're not going to have a point in this game. Yeah, they almost did. Yeah.
Being able to bet against Tommy DeVito is the gift that keeps on giving. He's terrible. He's horrible. And the Giants have given up, so that was an easy win. I go 2-1 on the week. I'm up to 9 points on the season. 1 point up on Alex. Next week, we'll determine who between us, most likely Alex, ends up getting punished. With Alex T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, Ben Bishop, former Dallas Stars goalie under Jim Montgomery. What's it like to play for him? We'll talk to him next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The St. Louis Blues made a coaching change over the weekend as they fired head coach Drew Bannister and hired Jim Montgomery. And Jim Montgomery will make his coaching debut tonight for the St. Louis Blues as the Blues visit the New York Rangers. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for puck drop at 6 o'clock. And former St. Louis Blues and Dallas Stars goalie Ben Bishop will join the show coming up next here on BK and Ferrario. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by Ben Bishop. It was cool yesterday. We saw Jim Montgomery officially hired by the St. Louis Blues, and Alex started thinking about, okay, who's played under Jim Montgomery in the past that we could get a hold of to talk about what that experience was like. Ben Bishop was the first name that came to mind, played for him with Dallas as the goalie under Jim Montgomery. He joins us now on BK and Ferrario. Ben, we appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely thrilled to have you. So tell us a little bit, Ben, about your experience with Jim Montgomery. The two of you were together down in Dallas. You had an unbelievable season for him in 2018. What was it like playing for Jim Montgomery as the head coach?
Well, it was neat for me because he went to University of Maine, and, he's a legend up there. Probably he captained the best college hockey team of all time. I think in the 92-93 season when they went 42-1-2 and won the national championship. And I obviously knew his name after I went there. And when we hired him as a head coach in Dallas, I was excited to have another, fellow Black Bear with me. And, it was great. He's a very smart hockey player, very high hockey IQ coach. He's able to make changes on the fly pretty quick. He reads the game from the bench really well. So, the first year we had together, it was unbelievable. He's a player's coach. He's one of those guys that he can go into his room and, talk about anything, and not one of those guys you're intimidated of. He's a very friendly person. So I think the Blues got a good hire.
Ben, the part that I find so fascinating about Jim when he was with the Dallas Stars was the two previous seasons, it was a team that missed the playoffs. They were drafting towards the higher rounds. And then that first year of Jim Montgomery with a group that had, 30-year-old Jamie Benn, 32-year-old Radulov. They had yourself, a lot of veteran presence in the locker room. Man, he found a way to command a locker room with guys who had been in the league for 10-plus years and guys who were 22, 23 years old.
Exactly. He commands respect from everybody because of the way that he coaches. He doesn't, favor this guy or that guy. The more you're with him, you understand how smart he is as far as like hockey IQ and the way that he can run a team. So he demands respect from everybody, and everybody likes him. It's not one of those things where he picks on somebody and this people don't like him. These guys like him. He's a player's coach. He's for everybody. If you play the way he wants to play, then you're going to play.
It's interesting, Ben. You played for some really good coaches in your NHL career. You played for Cooper down in Tampa Bay. You played for Hitch and Jim Montgomery in Dallas. What are some of the qualities in your mind that you would describe the best coaches in the NHL that they all have in common? Because those are different guys, different styles, but what do they have in common that makes them excellent coaches in your opinion?
Well, first off, you got to have, high hockey IQ, which I think all three of those guys that you mentioned do. But I think most importantly is, people, like you can go up to them and talk to them about, not just hockey, about, life and that, and joke around with them and kind of separate the job and, friendship that you have with your coach. It's nice to be able to go up to a coach and talk about anything and not be intimidated or scared to go talk to the coach. He's one of those guys with the open door policy. You can joke around with him about anything, but then at the same time, that, he's your boss and he's smart, right? He knows the game just as well as anybody, and you can see that from the record he's had. So it's nice to have those coaches that, have the respect of the team, but also kind of, you can mess around with and have some fun with.
Ben, from a goaltender's viewpoint, when you're on the ice, you see everything. You see the developing offense. You see how they play defensively. Was there an area of the Dallas Stars game that you felt like made an improvement once Jim Montgomery took over that first season?
I did. Monty himself was a very offensive forward. I don't know about his pro stats, but I know in college, he might even have the record for the most points in college. But he's a defensive-minded coach as far as, protecting the middle, especially off the rushes. I remember the first year he came in was probably the least amount of odd-man rushes I've ever had in my career. He really wants the D to stay inside the dots and protect against odd-man rushes, and then he lets the forwards create. He's not going to get upset if you make a mistake. So he really, he came from Sean Walsh and Grant Stanbrook in Maine, two of the best coaches, ever. So he learned from those guys, and Grant's still around, and I know they still talk. So he comes from a great coaching, past, and is defensive minded, but also lets the forwards be creative.
Ben Bishop is our guest for another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN, former Stars goalie under Jim Montgomery. Of course, had a little bit of time here in St. Louis as well. Ben, when I was looking into his time with Dallas, you guys were, in the brief time that he was there, like top 10 in the NHL in high danger chances, but didn't put a ton of shots on net, and then ended up being like 29th and 30th in goals for per game. That's not the typical profile that I would expect from a borderline elite level team in the NHL, but you guys were. How did you find a way to make that work?
We didn't give any goals up.
that works, apparently.
And is that getting back to that style of hockey that you were describing?
Yeah, when you don't give the chances, up every single game, and then you have the offensive ability with the players, that you're paying the big dollars to score goals. If you can keep pucks out of your net, you can find a way to get some goals offensively, and, it kind of goes with every cliche in every sport, but defense wins championships, and that's kind of the way that I think Monty thinks.
Ben, final one for me, and as always, man, we really appreciate this. You've been around the National Hockey League for a long time now. You're working with the Dallas Stars. You've seen the revolving door that is coaches in the National Hockey League. Why do you think that is, that you see such a short lifespan for coaches?
You know what? I don't have the best answer to that. I don't know. I'm still looking for that as well, but, it's no coincidence that Monty was at 5 days.
Yeah. Shortest span, I think, in the last 50 years.
I texted him. I was going to give it a week to text you, but now I guess say congratulations. So, I think it's the easiest person to get rid of, just because it's not easy to trade players. You can't fire players, but you can fire a coach, and unfortunately, that's just part of the job as a head coach. It's kind of sad, especially when you look at the family aspect. Everybody thinks of the sports side of it, but there's a lot more behind the scenes that goes involved getting fired or traded and that stuff. So it's a little upsetting, but it's the easiest, plug to pull there, because it's the only person you can really fire on the team that's part of people on the ice.
Hey, Ben, this has been great to be able to catch up, man. Appreciate your insight into Jim Montgomery, both the person and the coach that the Blues are going to be having behind the bench now. All the best to you and the family, man. We'll talk with you again soon.
No, anytime. I know the Blues got a great coach, and hopefully you can turn it around here.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ben.
It's Ben Bishop, former Dallas Stars goalie under Jim Montgomery, played briefly here in St. Louis as well. If I'm not mistaken, has a restaurant in the area out in Chesterfield. So appreciate Ben Bishop for hopping on with us today. If you guys missed any of that conversation, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. Alex, I want to wrap our thoughts up on the Jim Montgomery deal, him being named the next head coach of the St. Louis Blues. Some of the thoughts from both Monty and from Doug Armstrong from yesterday, and Blues are playing against the New York Rangers tonight.
Oh, jeez.
There's a couple of players on the ice for the New York Rangers that are allegedly available via trade. Is that anything that the Blues should be interested in? We'll get into all of that rep-a-bow on this thing with the BK and Ferrario Rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
Spent a good portion of the show today, as you would expect, on the St. Louis Blues hiring Jim Montgomery as their next head coach. It's a move, Alex, that we discussed at length. A lot of the last couple of shows last week were spent on this because it felt like an obvious move if Doug Armstrong wanted to make a change as the head coach. They decided to do that on Sunday, called a press conference, explained why they decided to do this, and it was basically like, hey, I can't not go out there and hire this guy.
Yeah.
This is a different kind of candidate that's available right now than what you typically expect. So the Blues had to make the move. I think it was the right move. I think we're all on the same page in that regard. T-Bone maybe with a little bit more hesitance, but we all agree with that.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say the one thing
please.
Robert Thomas popped in, or he was on the morning skate today when he was talking afterwards, and he said, look, he's a big part of getting us to the players we are today.
Talking about Bannister?
No, Robert Thomas. He's talking Jim Montgomery. He's a big part of getting us to the players that we are today. It's exciting to be back with him and back on the ice with him today. So I think I'm most curious of what this is going to look like with the guys that played for him in the past. What do they look like now with the Jim Montgomery behind the bench?
Should we get a comment on Bannister?
Robert Thomas, that's what I was about to say.
Kyra was sitting next to him.
Robert Thomas, his first question asked in a press conference today was about Jim Montgomery. His response, first off, I would like to talk about Drew for a little bit. Great person, great hockey mind, great coach. I learned a lot from him as a player, but also as a person. I just want to say thank you to him. It's always tough going through a change, and I wish him and his family all the best. So credit to Robert Thomas. Stand up. He's going to be on the morning show tomorrow at 9 a.m., so they'll certainly talk to him about the change. We'll see a game under Jim Montgomery as the Blues head coach by the time that he is on with the morning show tomorrow. For those of you curious, they did change up the lines at morning skate today. Booch, Thomas, and Neighbors is now your top line. Saad, Shin, and Kyrou. Bolduc back in the lineup on that third line. That's the biggest change. He's in the lineup. Joseph out. Sonny Holloway filling out that third line. And then the WTF line is your fourth line going into the game tonight. Alex will have pregame coverage for this one versus the New York Rangers starting at 5 o'clock. All right, Alex, before we get out of here, we don't need to spend too much time on this, but it is a big news story in the NHL today. According to multiple reports nationally, the Rangers are making it known that multiple players, Trouba and Chris Kreider, are available in trade right now as they look to shake things up, try to improve this roster. Alex, you know if Chris Kreider is going to be available via trade.
The tip king.
I am interested in Chris Kreider. Should the Blues be interested in Chris Kreider? And is this a move that they could reasonably make?
No, they shouldn't be interested in Chris Kreider. Sorry, BK. You're going to cry a little bit here.
I'm actually disappointed.
He's 33 years old. Like, he's got 3 years left making $6.5 million. He's 33 years old. Does that guy fit into the timeline of what you're trying to accomplish?
Are you trying to win?
No.
Not right now.
Well,
I'm not.
I don't know anymore, but I think no.
No, I mean, like Doug Armstrong mentioned the retool like 5 times yesterday. No, I don't think they're trying to win. I think they're trying to be a playoff team. I don't think they're trying to win. And I'm not going to go spend assets to go bring in this guy, which, guys, the New York Rangers are trying to win a Stanley Cup right now. Now, why would they be trying to trade Chris Kreider?
Because there's only so many things that they can do to shake things up.
Well, you're right. And they also need money in certain areas. But, like, the Kreider thing doesn't make sense. The Trouba one's interesting because he's younger, but that one really doesn't make sense because he's making $8 million this year and next year. And remember, Trouba was tried to be traded in the offseason, and they couldn't find any takers. The Rangers aren't going to be able to eat any money on this because they're trying to free up cap space so that they can pay Shesterkin and Miller and a lot of these other RFAs. Kreider is a very interesting player. He helps in a lot of areas of your game, specifically a team that's trying to be more powerful in front of the net. But, man, 33 years old, by the end of this year, 36, that just doesn't match what the Blues are trying to do.
If they're not going to do this. If the Rangers said, you know what, we'll take a draft pick, Bolduc, and Brandon Saad, and we'll make the money work so it's even with Chris Kreider. Are you doing it?
Probably not.
Really?
Yeah, probably not.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not going to give up a Bolduc for a 33-year-old.
That's where I am.
But he's a good 33-year-old.
Yeah, but we're not. I don't think we're winning or trying to win.
I think this team can win if it adds Chris Kreider. Not a cup. I think this team can make it to the playoffs and make it interesting.
Yeah, but you got to win a cup if you're going to get Chris Kreider.
See, I don't feel that way. I think it's okay sometimes to just try to make your team better.
I don't think they did that in the offseason.
Yeah, I think they did that already. I think they did make their team better.
Apparently they did that by hiring Montgomery.
Okay. Well.
What do you mean apparently?
We have no idea.
Kadarius.
Is there another move out there, Alex, that is potentially available that has been announced today?
T-Bone hit my open. Oh, wait, no, it's the rewind.
We've only got another minute here.
Philly, apparently, David Pagnotta, our good buddy from the fourth period, is talking about they're shopping a 25-year-old centerman that they've got, Morgan Frost. That's more of a move that if you're the Blues, say, hey, this helps now, and it helps for the future because he's in that age frame. I don't think they're making any trades anytime soon. Like, this team is now, hey, we got the coach. Now you just need to go out there and perform. But if you're searching for a centerman right now. You're not searching for a winger or a defenseman.
In all seriousness, Morgan Frost is the guy that I would be interested in. The problem is, I would imagine there's going to have to be more that you give up in that kind of a trade as opposed to. I think Kreider might legitimately be a salary dump.
Oh, yeah.
Which feels insane, but I think that's likely to happen.
Frost is making $4 million, if I'm not mistaken.
2.5.
2.5, and then he's an RFA this upcoming season. So, I mean, Kreider is legitimately going to be like, hey, can you take on $6.5 million, which T-Bone made it correct in our show prep. Playing for the Vegas Golden Knights to acquire him. Nobody knows what Mark Stone's injury is, but he won't be back to the playoffs.
I just know he won't be back.
Yeah. All right, that's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.